Solipsism. Have you ever had a thought so strange it made you pause? A thought that stayed with you like a quiet echo in your mind, slowly growing louder the more you tried to ignore it. Philosophy has a way of doing that. It begins with the smallest question and leads you into a space where everything feels uncertain, fragile like glass in your hands. One such idea is solipsism. It whispers the possibility that you are the only conscious mind in existence, that the world around you, its people, its voices, its laughter and pain, are not real in the way you believe. They may all be imagined creations of your own mind, as if you are dreaming the entire universe and just haven't woken up yet. No one else truly exists but you. It's not just a fantasy or a nightmare. It's a serious philosophical position. And once it enters your thoughts, it's hard to shake. From there, the world starts to wobble. What if your brain isn't in your body at all? What if it's floating in a jar somewhere, connected to a computer feeding you every sound, sight, and feeling? This is the brain in a vat thought experiment. A lab technician types a command, and you feel happy. Another code, and you're cold or in love or watching the sunrise, but none of it is real. Can you ever know for sure that your life isn't an illusion? Then there's the question of identity. If every part of something is replaced piece by piece, is it still the same thing? Imagine a ship repaired over years until none of the original wood remains. Is it the same ship? Now think about your body. Every cell in it will eventually be replaced. So, are you still you? Another thought. What if none of this is real because we're inside a simulation? A world designed by a higher intelligence running complex code. This idea, once science fiction, now exists in serious academic papers. Statistically, some argue it's even more likely we're simulated than not. You think you're sitting, breathing, listening, but maybe you're just pixels on a screen of someone else's game. Imagine if you lived your life over and over again, forever. The same choices, same mistakes, same conversations. That's the idea of eternal recurrence. Every moment repeats endlessly. Would you do anything differently, knowing that your life will loop again without escape? Morality, too, becomes foggy when examined closely. Suppose a train is heading toward 5 people tied to a track. You can pull a lever and divert it, killing only one person on the other path. What do? Is it right to sacrifice one to save 5? Questions like these don't have clean answers. They're designed to unsettle. And what if you could plug into a machine that gave you a perfect life? All your dreams come true, everything feels real, but it's not. Would you choose that illusion over a flawed reality? And if so, what does that say about us? Some ideas sound simple but shake our trust in the world, like ZENO'S paradoxes, where movement itself seems impossible. If you must travel halfway to a point before reaching it, and then halfway again and again, how do you ever arrive? It feels absurd. And yet, the logic traps you. Others question the very structure of belief. If God exists and heaven is real, shouldn't we believe in him just in case? That's PASCAL'S wager, not a matter of faith, but a calculated bet. Eternal happiness versus the risk of being wrong. Perception plays tricks on us. You never see the world directly. You only see what your brain interprets. You don't hear sound waves. You hear what your mind decides those waves mean. You live not in the world, but in your brain's version of it. So what if that version is wrong? Some philosophers ask whether a machine could ever be conscious. If a man sits in a room with instructions on how to respond to Chinese characters, does he understand Chinese? If not, then does a computer that mimics conversation truly understand language? Other thoughts speak of nothingness. Nihilism tells us that life has no meaning, no purpose, no inherent value. Everything we love and suffer for doesn't matter. That sounds bleak, but for some, it feels like a strange kind of freedom. If a grain of sand doesn't make a heap, when does it become one? If someone loses a hair, they're not bald, but lose one more, and another? Where's the line? Sometimes there are no answers, just blurred edges. Then there are paradoxes that seem to mock logic itself. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy it cannot lift it? If yes, it's not all-powerful. If no, still not all-powerful. The question isn't about rocks. It's about the boundaries of thought. And what if there's a universe just like ours with a single difference? Maybe water is made of something else, but everyone still calls it water. Would it still be the same world? Then comes a truly strange idea, the Boltzmann brain. In the chaos of the universe, a brain might form by pure chance, just a floating, thinking mind imagining a world that never existed. Could that brain be you? Some say the self doesn't exist. Not really. You're just a bundle of experiences and thoughts, pretending to be a solid person, but there's no unchanging core, only shifting patterns. Tolerance itself becomes a paradox. If we tolerate everything, even those who want to destroy tolerance, do we lose the very thing we're protecting? Imagine a child drowning in a shallow pond. You'd save them. But thousands of children die every day far away, and we walk past. Why? They say if a monkey types on a keyboard for eternity, eventually it will write Shakespeare. What does that say about randomness, about genius, about purpose? Even the most basic assumptions aren't safe. The sun has risen every morning. But how do you know it will rise tomorrow? Not hope, knowledge. Can you be sure? Then there's Mary, who knows everything about color, but has never seen it. When she finally sees red, does she learn something new? Is experience deeper than knowledge? If you're woken up in a room with no memory of how many times it's happened, how do you reason through your own reality? Radical skepticism strips away every assumption. What can you truly know? Perhaps nothing. What if you're right about something by luck, not knowledge? If you guess correctly without knowing why, do you really know it? A servant makes tea every morning thinking it's a choice. But if he's been programmed to do it, is it still free will? A donkey stands between two identical piles of hay and starves, unable to choose. Sometimes too many equal options lead to paralysis. If two things are completely identical, are they still two things or one thing with two places? A prediction says you'll make a certain choice. You know the prediction. Do you act freely or fulfill the prophecy? If every culture has its own morality, is anything truly right or wrong? Or are values just stories we tell? And finally, what if the world was created last Thursday with all your memories implanted? Can you prove otherwise? Probably not. These thoughts aren't meant to depress, they're meant to awaken, to make us question what we usually ignore. Philosophy is not always a comfort. It is often a mirror that shows us truths we don't want to see. But in that discomfort, there's growth. If these thoughts stirred something in you, hold on to it. Let them echo a while. You don't need to solve them, just let them be. And if you'd like to explore more of these questions with me, stay curious. There's always another mystery waiting. Eternal return. Have you ever had a feeling that you've lived this exact moment before? Not just a vague déjà vu, but a full sense that this second, this breath, this glance at the screen has happened already. And not once, but forever. There is a thought, ancient and strange, that life doesn't move forward like a line. Instead, it loops, a circle, without beginning, without end. This is the idea of the eternal return. It's not a prophecy. It's not even a belief. It is a whisper from the deepest parts of philosophy and myth. A suggestion that everything that has happened, every word, every step, every choice, nay, will happen again. Exactly the same, and again, and again, and again, forever. You are not simply living a life, you are reliving it, not metaphorically, but completely. Every smile, every heartbreak, every time you laughed so hard it hurt, Every night you couldn't sleep, every goodbye, every birth, every death. They've happened already. They will happen again. You may not remember, but maybe somewhere in the stillness you can feel it. The idea is haunting. Because it means this life, this exact one, is not a draft. It's not a rehearsal. There's no next version where you'll fix the mistakes. It's this one, forever. The roots of this thought go back to the Stoics in ancient Greece. They imagined the universe burning and being reborn endlessly, a fire that repeats the same patterns with perfect precision. But it was the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche who gave this idea its most famous voice. He didn't say it was true, he asked. What if it were? What if, one day, a demon crept into your loneliest moment and whispered, "This life, just as it is, you will have to live again, and again, for eternity." Would you fall to the ground cursing it? Or would you embrace it? Would you say, "Yes, I want it all again"? That is the test. Not whether the eternal return is real, but whether you can live as though it is. It's not about fear, it's about meaning. Because if this life repeats endlessly, then every moment matters more, not less. Every small kindness, every cruel word, every skipped opportunity, every quiet sunset you almost didn't notice, they aren't just moments in time, they are eternal. They echo forever. Think about it. Would you say the same things if you knew you'd say them again? Would you treat people differently? Would you forgive more, love harder, listen longer? Or maybe you would finally stop waiting for the right time, waiting for the perfect mood, waiting for someone else to change, because the time is always now. And now will return and return and return. But this idea can also feel heavy. Some people find it terrifying, like being trapped in a story you can't escape. But others find comfort in it. Because if you are doomed to repeat, then maybe nothing is ever truly lost. Maybe your greatest joy is still out there, waiting to be lived again. Maybe the person you miss most is never really gone, just waiting to return in some far cycle of the eternal. And maybe, just maybe, every goodbye is also a promise to meet again, in the same time, the same place, under the same stars. You don't have to believe in eternal return. You don't have to accept it as truth, but you can let it shape your life. Live as if the weight of every moment is real. Live as if every small act will echo across eternity. Live as if this is not just a life, but your life, forever. Because maybe that's what matters in the end. Not whether the cycle is true, but whether you choose to dance inside it with your eyes open and your heart awake. So when the moment returns, you'll be ready to live it again and again and again. And yet, this idea, the eternal return, isn't just about the big moments. It's also about the smallest ones. The way the light falls through your window at 4:27 p.m., the sound your shoes make on gravel, the flicker of emotion when someone says your name just right. Those tiny, fragile, everyday experiences that seem to vanish in time. What if they're not lost? What if they're stitched into the very pattern of the universe, and you will walk through them again? There is something strangely beautiful about this, not just repetition, but a kind of cosmic memory. You may not feel it, but you're tracing a path you've walked before. And perhaps in another loop, you'll pause a little longer. You'll notice more. You'll breathe it in instead of rushing past. We are often told to live in the moment. But what does that mean? We scroll through time like it's endless, postponing joy, delaying peace, always reaching for the next thing, the next step, as if life is something just beyond the horizon. But what if there is no horizon, no forward, no later? What if time curls back on itself like smoke? What if all we ever have is now, and not just once, again, and again, and again? Imagine this. Every hug you gave, You will give again. Every tear that slid quietly down your cheek will fall again. Every word you wish you hadn't said will echo once more, and so will every chance you took, every risk, every love you dared to feel, even when it hurt, every time you chose kindness when it was easier to turn away. They are not gone. They are woven into eternity. It's not a warning, it's a mirror, a soft invitation to live with a little more intention. To ask yourself, would I be proud to live this moment again? Would I find joy in returning to this exact breath? Of course, we make mistakes. We stumble. We hurt others. We fall short of our ideals. That is part of the pattern too. But maybe knowing it all returns doesn't mean we must be perfect. Maybe it simply means we should be more present, more awake, more human. And in this idea, this looping life, there is something almost spiritual. It takes the everyday and paints it with permanence. Your life isn't just one path through time, it is a spiral, a symphony played on repeat, and you are the melody. But not everyone hears the music. Some will say, this is a trap, a prison. I don't want to live this life again. I want to escape. And that is fair. Because life is not always gentle. There is loss. There is pain. There are days when everything feels heavy. And if those days return, can we bear it? But maybe it's not about avoiding the pain. Maybe it's about finding meaning within it, carving beauty out of the sorrow, and knowing that joy, too, will come around again. This thought, the eternal return, is not here to frighten. It is here to deepen, to stretch our view of time and self and choice, to remind us that even the smallest action ripples forever. Maybe if we held that truth in our hearts, we'd speak softer, apologize sooner, forgive more freely, love without holding back, because every encounter is not just once. It is once and for always. So the next time you open your eyes in the morning, feel the sun on your skin, drink that first sip of coffee or hold someone's hand. Let it be enough. Let it be sacred, because this moment may return, and you get to decide how it feels. Nietzsche said we must live as though we'd welcome each moment again, not just once, but infinitely. That's the challenge. Not to change the world, but to walk through it as if every step leaves a mark on eternity. So maybe we stop waiting for the right time. Maybe we stop imagining the next version of ourselves and start living this version here, fully, again and again and again. Because this might be the only life we ever get, or it might be the one we live forever. Either way, let's make it worth repeating. Last Thursdayism. Have you ever stopped to wonder if everything you know, your memories, your identity, even the feeling of time itself, might have been created just last Thursday? That maybe, just maybe, your entire life, as you remember it, never happened at all. This is the strange and quiet idea known as last Thursdayism, and it begins with a question. What if the universe was created last Thursday? Fully formed, complete with cities, oceans, stars, fossils, half-read books on your shelf, and even your memories. Not fabricated, but placed. As if someone hit start on reality just a few days ago and built everything with history already baked in. The photos on your phone, the scar on your knee, the ache in your heart when you remember someone long gone. All of it, placed like props on a stage, not as lies, but as part of a perfectly crafted illusion. The unsettling part, you can't disprove it. Because no matter what evidence you present, old documents, childhood drawings, ancient fossils, a person who believes in last Thursdayism will simply say, yes, of course, they were created that way, on Thursday. It's not about being right or wrong, it's about the limits of what we can know. This idea doesn't come from madness or paranoia. It comes from philosophy, from the minds who dared to ask, what can we be absolutely certain of? And the answer, more often than not, is almost nothing. René Descartes, centuries ago, doubted the very world around him. He wondered if some evil force was tricking his senses, making him believe in a world that didn't exist. His famous conclusion was simple: I think, therefore I am. But everything else he did could be an illusion. Last Thursdayism picks up that doubt and adds a twist of time. Not only might the world be false, it might also be new but appearing ancient, like a dream where everything feels familiar, even though it just began. Imagine waking up in a room filled with photos, letters, clothes, all yours. You remember buying them, wearing them, living them. But what if it's all been placed there, and your memories, not lived but inserted? What makes memory real? Is it time, experience, emotion, or is it simply belief? This is where the thought becomes disturbing. Because if you can't prove your memories are real, how do you know who you truly are? What if you weren't born at all? What if your first breath happened last Thursday and everything else was part of a script? Now pause. Take a breath, feel your heart beating. Think of your oldest memory, that one blurry moment from childhood, the smell of the air, the shape of the sky. What if that moment never happened? Does it make you feel less real? Or does it make the present more important? Because if the past can't be trusted, then all we really have is this moment, right now, this breath, this heartbeat. And maybe that's enough. But why Thursday? That part is a little playful. The idea echoes from an old joke aimed at people who believe the earth is only a few thousand years old, that God created the world with fossils and light beams already in place to make it appear older. The joke was, well, how do you know the world wasn't created last Thursday? But under that joke is a serious question. What do we accept as evidence of time? Is it memory, history books, the age of stars, or is it all just part of the set? The thought feels absurd, but that's the point. Last Thursdayism is not about belief, it's about humility. It reminds us that our understanding of the world rests on assumptions. Assumptions that memory is reliable, that history is true, that time flows in one direction. But what if those assumptions are wrong? What if the world is a masterpiece of simulation and the clock didn't start until just a few days ago? Then again, what difference would it make? Would you stop loving the people you love? Would you stop enjoying the food you eat, the music you hear, the warmth of sunlight? No, because even if everything began last Thursday, it feels real, and in that feeling, there is truth. Some philosophers say if we cannot disprove it, does it matter? And that's where last Thursdayism becomes not just a thought experiment, but a mirror. It shows us how deeply we rely on trust. Trust in our senses, trust in time, trust in memory. And when that trust shakes, what do we hold on to? Maybe we hold on to presence, to the now, to each other. Because whether we've known someone for 10 years or since last Thursday, doesn't change how they make us feel today. Maybe we were created with sadness and scars already written into our story. Or maybe we lived every second of it. Maybe both can be true. What matters is how we live from here. Philosophy often gives us no answers, just questions that echo quietly in the corners of the mind, and that's what last Thursdayism does. It doesn't say the world is fake. It says, what if everything you rely on could be wrong? And how would you live if that were true? Would you cling to control, or would you let go and just be? There's a strange kind of peace in accepting the unknown, because if the universe did begin last Thursday, and everything was created just so, then maybe your pain was chosen for a reason, and so was your joy, and your strength, and your wonder. Maybe you were placed here now, with everything you need to be who you are. No history needed, just presence. Last Thursdayism isn't here to scare you. It's here to remind you that even the most certain truths are built on mystery. And maybe That mystery is beautiful. So the next time someone asks when the world began, maybe you smile and say, "Just last Thursday, but I'm making the most of it." Brain in a vat. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel the world around you. The light behind your eyelids, the sound of your breath, the sensation of your body pressing against the chair. Now ask yourself, how do you know any of it is real? You see, there's a question that philosophy asks, a question that hums like a quiet echo in the background of human thought. What if nothing you perceive is real at all? What if your entire experience, your senses, your memories, your emotions, are simply illusions, carefully crafted, fed to your mind like a dream you never woke up from? This is the unsettling idea known as the brain in a vat. It imagines that you, the person you believe yourself to be, are not sitting here watching a screen, living in a body, walking through a real world. Instead, you are a brain, just a brain, suspended in a tank of nutrients connected to wires, and somewhere a powerful computer is feeding you every sensation you've ever felt. The warmth of a hug, the pain of heartbreak, the sound of laughter, the softness of snow, even this moment, right now, reading these words, all of it is being transmitted, perfectly simulated, so perfect, in fact, that you can't tell the difference. It feels real, but it isn't. This thought experiment doesn't come from science fiction, though it inspired many of its greatest works. It comes from the world of epistemology, the study of knowledge. The brain in a vat is meant to shake the foundations of what we claim to know, because if you cannot prove you're not a brain in a vat, then how can you trust anything? Not your senses, not your memories, not even your own body. It's a modern echo of Descartes, who wondered if an evil demon was deceiving him, creating a false reality. But where Descartes imagined spirits, we imagine technology, a lab, a server, a cold room with wires and tubes, and you floating silently, unaware. The question is not whether this is happening. The question is, what if it could be? And if it could, how would you ever know? You see, the trick of the brain in a vat is that the illusion is flawless. The brain responds to signals. If the computer sends just the right signals, the brain believes. It believes the sky is blue. It believes it once fell in love. It believes it is in a world walking, breathing, deciding. But it is not. It is dreaming. And here's the haunting part. What if this is your dream? You think you are living a life. But perhaps you are remembering a life that was programmed into your brain. Perhaps every face you've ever known was never real, just patterns, simulated by code, invented by wires. Maybe even the thought you're having right now, the doubt, the fear, the curiosity, is part of the illusion. If that's true, then everything becomes fragile. The world you trust, the people you love, the meaning you carry, could all be a fabrication. But before you fall into despair, ask yourself, does it matter? If your love feels real, if your laughter brings you joy, if your sorrow teaches you softness, even if they are simulated, aren't they still yours? Just like a dream that touches your heart, even after you wake up. Maybe what matters is not whether it's real, but whether it's true to you. Some thinkers say, if we're all brains in vats and none of us can ever know, then perhaps we should live as if it's all real anyway. Because life isn't about perfect certainty. It's about meaning, about experience, about connection, even if imagined. The brain in a vat also speaks to our age, an age of screens, of virtual worlds, of lives lived online, curated, filtered, and uploaded. Sometimes we're not sure what's real anymore, what's true, what's honest. We scroll through images that make us feel alone. We chase validation in numbers. We build versions of ourselves that may not even feel like us. And so, in a way, aren't we already living in a simulation, not one built in a lab, but one we carry in our pockets. Sometimes we confuse the digital with the actual, the profile with the person, the moment with the memory. And so this thought experiment becomes more than a riddle. It becomes a warning to remember what it means to feel, to be present, to truly see. Because even if you are a brain in a vat, you still have the power to choose kindness, to seek truth, to create beauty. Even in a false world, you can be real. That's what makes this thought both terrifying and beautiful. It strips away everything you thought was certain, but leaves behind the one thing that matters most: your mind, your will, your awareness, you. So now you might wonder, am I a brain in a vat? Maybe, maybe not. But ask instead, how would I live if I could never be sure? Would I love more deeply? Would I speak more honestly? Would I waste less time? Because whether this world is real or not, you're in it. And you get to decide what that means. Maybe you were born in a hospital, or maybe you were activated in a lab. Either way, you are here now, feeling, thinking, wondering, and maybe that's all that matters. The brain in a vat isn't here to give you answers. It's here to remind you that even your questions are precious. So when the world feels uncertain, when you wonder what's real and what's not, come back to this. You are aware. You are here. You are. And perhaps that is enough. The simulation hypothesis. What if everything isn't real? What if the stars above, the trees swaying in the wind, the laughter of someone you love, even the warmth of the sun on your skin, are not made of atoms, but lines of code? The simulation hypothesis asks a quiet but world-shattering question. Are we living in a computer simulation? A world rendered in perfect detail, so perfect that we don't even notice the illusion, because it feels just like life. This isn't just a science fiction fantasy. It's a question taken seriously by philosophers, scientists, and thinkers across the world. Because when you look closely at reality, it starts to look an awful lot like a program. The idea is simple but vast. Imagine a civilization far more advanced than us. They've mastered technology in ways we can only dream of. Now imagine they create simulations, not games, but entire realities. Universes, with stars, cities, people, histories, billions of lives, each unaware they are made of code. Now, ask this. If it's possible to create a simulated reality, how do we know we're not already in one? The philosopher Nick Bostrom posed this argument. In 2003, he said logically, at least one of these must be true. 1. Civilizations never reach the technological level to run such simulations. 2. If they do, they choose not to simulate realities. 3. We are almost certainly in a simulation right now. Because if advanced civilizations run simulations, they could run many, thousands, millions. And those simulations could have beings who also create simulations. And suddenly, the number of simulated beings vastly outnumbers the real ones. So, what are the odds that we're among the few real ones? Not high. It's a dizzying idea, one that pulls the floor out from under you, because if it's true, then the rules of the universe are not natural laws. They're software. Physics is not ultimate. It's just the rules of the game. Your memories? They could be pre-written. Your thoughts? Just electrical patterns reacting to inputs from the system. Maybe there is no Earth, no stars, no history, just code, looping and updating from one tick of the system clock to the next. And somewhere outside this world, a programmer watches, or maybe doesn't. Maybe the simulation runs on autopilot, unobserved, forgotten, like an old game left running in the background. Now pause. Look around you, touch something nearby, listen to a sound, feel your breath. How do you know it's real? Some point to strange truths in physics as clues. That the universe seems quantized, made of tiny indivisible units, like pixels, that particles change behavior when we observe them, like they render only when looked at, that the universe has limits, speed limits, energy caps, as if it were built for efficiency. And then there are the glitches, moments when time feels strange, when déjà vu floods your senses, when you swear something was one way, but now it isn't. Tiny cracks in the simulation, or just the mind playing tricks. And even if it is all fake, does that make it meaningless? Not necessarily, because in the end, even a simulated life is still a life. You still feel joy. You still ache with grief. You still dream, love, create. If the world is a game, you are not the pawn. You are the player. And players matter. This idea isn't new. Plato spoke of shadows on the cave wall, illusions mistaken for truth. Hindu philosophy speaks of Maya, the veil of illusion that hides true reality. And countless mystics throughout time have said, this world is not what it seems. Maybe they were right. Maybe we've always known, in some quiet corner of our hearts, that something about life feels strangely scripted. But maybe it doesn't matter whether it's real or not. Maybe what matters is how we live inside it. Would you live differently if you knew the truth? Would you love harder? Would you be braver? Would you forgive faster? Would you create more? Maybe the knowledge that life is a simulation is not a curse, but a freedom, a reminder that nothing is fixed, that you are not bound by what has always been, that you can write your own code, shape your own story, that the rules of this world are not chains, but challenges. Even if this is a dream, you are the dreamer, and that means you can awaken, or maybe you choose not to. Maybe you live fully here, in the illusion, in the light, in the love, because even if the sky is rendered, it is still beautiful. Even if your body is simulated, it still dances, it still heals, it still carries you forward. Even if the universe is code, your heart is still your own. So ask yourself, if this is a simulation, what do you want to do with it? How do you want to shape your time here? Because real or not, this is the world you have. And that makes it precious. So live as if you chose it, as if you designed it, as if it's exactly what you need to become who you are, because maybe it is. And maybe the simulation, whether by accident or intention, created the most extraordinary thing of all. You, a soul that questions, a mind that wonders, a heart that still hopes, even when it doesn't understand. So whether you're real, imagined, simulated, or something in between, you're here. And this moment, this beautiful, strange, miraculous moment, is yours. So live it. Not because it's real, but because it's yours. Determinism. Close your eyes. Now think back to a decision you made recently. Maybe it was something small, what to eat, what to wear, what to say. Did you choose it? Or did something else choose it for you? This is the quiet weight of determinism, a deep, ancient idea that every moment, every action, and every thought you've ever had was inevitable. Not random, not free, but caused, determined, like falling dominoes one after another, stretching backwards through time, from your hand to your birth, to the stars exploding before you were ever imagined. In a deterministic universe, nothing is spontaneous. Every word you speak is an echo of what came before. Every heartbeat is a rhythm set in motion long before you learned what a heartbeat was. Even this moment, you, sitting here, watching this, thinking these thoughts, was already written in the atoms of the cosmos. There is no fork in the road, only one path. And yet, it feels like we choose. It feels like we pause, weigh, wonder, decide. So why does it feel like freedom when the machinery underneath says otherwise? Let's go deeper. Determinism doesn't mean life is robotic. It doesn't say we are puppets. It says We are systems, complex, elegant, but bound by physics, by cause and effect, by the motion of particles and the fire of our neurons. You think you choose to speak, but your words were sculpted by your childhood, your language, your hunger, your fear, your hope. Everything builds on everything. And so philosophers ask, if the universe is made of causes and effects, what space is left for freedom? The idea isn't new. The Stoics accepted it. So did the Enlightenment thinkers, who believed the universe was like a great clock, perfect, knowable, and entirely determined. Laplace imagined a mind so vast, so powerful, that it could know the position of every particle in the universe. And if it did, it could predict the future perfectly. In a deterministic world, the future is not waiting to be written. It is already written. We are just turning the pages. But then, what about responsibility? If every action is caused, can we be blamed? Can we be praised? If someone commits a crime because of biology, upbringing, trauma, time, is it their fault? Or was it always going to happen? This is where philosophy gets heavy, because our society is built on the belief that people choose, that we can do otherwise. But determinism says you never could have done otherwise, you only thought you could, and still we feel free. This leads to the concept of compatibilism, the idea that determinism and free will might coexist. That maybe freedom doesn't mean uncaused. Maybe it means acting from yourself. Even if you are a product of the past, your thoughts still emerge from you. Even if the reasons were written long ago, you are still the reason. It's not total freedom, but maybe it's enough. Now let's breathe a little wider. Think of the universe, the stars, the patterns, the laws of gravity, of motion, of light. Everything follows rules. And yet, within those rules, a flower grows, a voice sings, a hand reaches for another. There is structure, and there is softness. Even if life is determined, it does not feel hollow. It feels rich. Determinism does not steal your story. It is your story, woven into the fabric of time. You are not a glitch. You are not a puppet. You are a chapter in a novel that began before you and will continue after. And in that novel, you still speak, you still act, you still love. The words may be written, but how you say them, that's yours. There is comfort in this too. If the past could not have been different, then maybe you can forgive yourself. If your pain was part of the pattern, then maybe you don't need to carry guilt, only understanding. And if someone hurt you, maybe it wasn't because they were evil, but because their own dominoes fell that way. This doesn't excuse, but it explains. And with understanding, maybe healing begins. Determinism is not an answer, it is a lens. It helps you see the depth behind your choices, the weight of every cause behind every effect. It tells you, you are not separate from the universe, you are its expression. So the next time you make a decision, whether small or life-changing, pause and realize this too was meant to happen. Not by fate, but by motion, by law, by life. And maybe you were always meant to be here, right now, watching, wondering, becoming. Because maybe, just maybe, the universe didn't just determine you, it dreamed you. And you, in turn, continue the dream. Fatalism. Imagine standing at a crossroads. Two paths stretch out before you, one to the left, one to the right. You pause, you think, you wonder, and then you choose. But what if that choice was never really yours? What if the outcome was always going to be the same, no matter what road you walked? This is the quiet, haunting idea of fatalism. It tells us that the future is fixed, that no matter how much we try to change things, whatever is meant to happen will happen. Not because of logic, not because of physics, but because it's fated. Because it was always going to be that way. Where determinism says that events follow causes, fatalism says Some outcomes are simply meant to be. Written in the stars, etched in time, waiting for us to arrive. This idea is older than memory. Ancient cultures spoke of destiny, of oracles and prophecies, of threads woven by gods that no mortal could escape. In Greek mythology, there were the Moirai, the Fates, 3 goddesses who spun the thread of life, measured it, and cut it. No one, not even the gods, could change what they had woven. And we, too, live with that whisper, that maybe some things were never up to us. You fall in love with someone, and it feels like the universe made it happen. You miss a bus, and your life changes forever, as if something wanted you to miss it. Fatalism lives in those quiet moments, the ones that feel planned, scripted, uncanny. But it also lives in the heavy ones, the moments of helplessness, when we wonder, did it even matter that I tried? That's the weight of fatalism. It doesn't just say things happen, it says they had to happen. And you? You were just walking the path laid before you. It's a seductive idea because it removes pressure. If everything is already written, then you don't have to carry the burden of control. You don't have to ask, what if? Because there was never a what if. Only what is. But it can also feel crushing because if you can't change anything, why try? If your life is a book already finished, what's the point of turning the pages? And yet most of us live in the space between. We want to believe we have power, that our actions matter, that we shape our fate. But deep down, when something beautiful or terrible happens, we still whisper to ourselves, it was meant to be. Even in science, we see echoes of fatalism. The laws of physics are time-symmetric. They don't care which direction time flows. So what if the future influences the past, just as the past influences the future? What if your destination pulls you, like gravity, toward what must be? And still, we hope. We hope we can change things, fix things, steer the ship, even if the storm is already on the map. This is the paradox of fatalism. It makes you feel powerless, but it also offers comfort. Because if you can't change fate, then maybe your mistakes weren't failures. Maybe they were necessary. Maybe your pain wasn't punishment, but prophecy. And maybe your joy wasn't just luck, but destiny. Some people resist fatalism. They say, no, I choose my path. Others lean into it, believing every moment has meaning because it was always going to happen. But here's a softer truth. Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other. Maybe your life is both. Maybe you are walking a path and also carving it as you go. Maybe the future is a mountain you were always meant to climb, but how you climb it, that's up to you. You can crawl, you can dance, you can fall and rise again, but you will reach the top because you were always going to. And maybe when you look back, you'll realize that the view from the summit was waiting for you all along, even if you didn't know it. Fatalism isn't about giving up. It's about letting go of the illusion of control and learning to move with the current, to trust the river, to let the tide carry you, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. Sometimes peace comes not from fighting the future, but from welcoming it. So next time something happens, something strange, something painful, something miraculous, pause and whisper to yourself, it was always going to be this way, and I was always going to survive it, and perhaps become more of myself because of it. The trolley problem. You're standing beside a track. In the distance, a trolley rushes forward, metal wheels slicing the silence. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the rails. They cannot move. They will not survive. But there's a lever beside you. If you pull it, the trolley will switch tracks. On that second track, there is one person, also tied down, also unable to escape. You cannot save them all. You must choose. Do you pull the lever and sacrifice one to save 5? This is the trolley problem. a thought experiment that seems simple, but reveals something raw and very human. It asks, what is the right thing to do? When every option leads to pain, there's no time to explain, no time to vote, just you, a choice, and the weight of 5 lives versus 1. Most people say, I'd pull the lever, I'd save the 5. And it sounds logical. 1 life lost is less than 5. Simple math. But then, what if the one person is your child, your partner, someone you love? Does the math change? What if you don't pull the lever? You do nothing, and 5 die. You didn't cause their death. You just let it happen. But is allowing death morally different from causing it? That's where the lines blur. Because ethics isn't just about numbers, it's about intent, responsibility, emotion, guilt. It's about being human in impossible situations. The trolley problem pushes us to the edge, not to test our logic, but to test our soul. You can twist the scenario. What if the one person is a doctor who would go on to save hundreds? What if the 5 are strangers, but the one is someone who's devoted their life to others? What if you could stop the trolley by pushing a large man onto the tracks? Would you do it then? Suddenly, the lever feels easier, less direct, less personal, but pushing someone, that feels wrong. Even if the outcome is the same. Why? Because ethics isn't just about outcomes, it's about how we get there. This is the divide between utilitarianism and deontology. Utilitarianism says, choose the action that brings the most good, the greatest happiness, the least harm. Deontology says, some actions are always wrong, no matter the result. It's not just what you do, it's what kind of person it makes you. So even if 5 live, if you had to lie or kill or betray, was it truly good? This thought experiment reveals something else too, that we are deeply uncomfortable with harm, even when it seems necessary, that we fear being the one who acts, who decides, who bears the burden. But isn't not choosing also a choice? You might say, I'd never be in that situation. And maybe that's true, but every day we make smaller versions of this choice. We buy things made in places where people suffer. We ignore stories we could respond to. We make quiet choices that benefit one, but cost another. The trolley may not be on rails, but it's moving through every system we're part of, and we are holding the lever. What makes the trolley problem so powerful isn't just its drama. It's its honesty. It says, there are no perfect answers, no clean hands, no way to live in this world without consequence. And that's hard, because we want to believe we're good people, that we would know what to do. But goodness isn't always clear, and sometimes it hurts. So, what can we take from all this? Maybe this, that ethics isn't just about theory. It's about humility. It's about knowing you won't always know what's right. It's about sitting with discomfort and choosing anyway. It's about compassion, not just for the victims, but for yourself, for being human in a world that offers no easy answers. And maybe the best we can do is to walk slowly toward each choice, with care, to look honestly at the tracks ahead and behind, and when the moment comes, to act with courage and kindness and a heart that's willing to break, because some questions don't need answers. They need integrity. Moral luck. You do the right thing. You try your best. You follow your conscience, your heart, your sense of what's fair, what's kind, what's good. But what if none of that is enough? What if your morality, your virtue, your responsibility is shaped not just by your choices, but by luck? This is the strange and unsettling idea of moral luck. It whispers something that feels unfair, that who you are, morally, isn't just about what you choose, but about what happens to you, or worse, what happens around you. It began as a philosophical riddle, a quiet observation made by Bernard Williams and Thomas Nagel. They asked, how can we praise or blame someone for something they didn't fully control? Think of this. Two drivers, both reckless, both drunk. One makes it home safely. The other hits a pedestrian and kills them. Same action, same moral failure, but only one is called a killer. Is that fair? One gets to sleep. The other lives with guilt, prison, and a different name in the world. Not because he chose differently, but because the universe spun differently. That's moral luck. It comes in different forms. There's resultant luck, when the outcome defines the morality. There's circumstantial luck, when the situations you face change how you're judged. A soldier in war, a civilian in peace, when faced with different choices, shaped by their world. There is constitutive luck, the personality you were born with, your temperament, your strength, your weaknesses. Were you born patient, impulsive, brave, afraid? And there's causal luck, the chain of events that made you who you are, your parents, your childhood, your genetics, your first heartbreak. All things you didn't choose, yet they shape what you will choose. And so we ask, can we ever really be blamed or praised? If a kind person is kind because they were loved, because they were safe, because life gave them warmth, do they deserve credit? And if a cruel person was raised in chaos, abandoned, hurt, left in the cold, do they deserve blame? The idea feels dangerous, because if we accept it, what happens to justice? If everyone is a product of chance, how do we hold anyone accountable? But maybe that's not the point. Maybe moral luck doesn't tell us to stop caring about responsibility. Maybe it tells us to look deeper, to be slower to judge, to ask what happened before the moment we see, to wonder what storms shaped the person in front of us. And maybe to be more gentle with ourselves, too. Because how often do we carry guilt for things that were never fully ours? How often do we punish ourselves for outcomes we couldn't control? You tried, you hoped, you meant well. But the result was pain. Does that make you bad? Or just human? Moral luck asks us to sit in the gray space where intention meets outcome, where ethics meets chaos. It doesn't erase morality, it complicates it. It tells us that goodness isn't always clean, that justice isn't always sharp, that being right isn't always enough. Sometimes being good means being humble, means admitting that you are part of a larger pattern of causes and effects, that you are not the sole author of your life, that sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't, and sometimes, yet, the difference between hero and villain is just one turn of fate. But this doesn't mean we give up. It means we try harder, not just to act rightly, but to understand, to listen, to forgive, to build systems that see the whole person, not just the moment. It means praising those who try, even when they fail, and helping those who fail, even when they tried. It means seeing goodness as a garden, nurtured by more than just the seed. It means seeing evil not just as choice, but as weather. This is not weakness. This is wisdom, to know that we all walk with the wind at our backs or against our faces, and that the true measure of a person might be not what they did, but what they did with the hands they were given. So the next time you're tempted to say, "They should have known better," pause and ask, "Would I have done better in their place?" And the next time you blame yourself for an outcome you couldn't control, pause and ask, "Did I act from care? Did I mean no harm?" Because sometimes that's enough. That is moral luck, not an excuse, not a verdict, but a mirror, a soft lens, a quiet call to compassion in a world that often judges too quickly, and perhaps a reminder that goodness is never just luck, it's also grace. The experience machine. Close your eyes. Now imagine this. There is a machine, a perfect machine. You enter it, and your world becomes anything you want. Absolute joy, endless love, dreams realized, no pain, no failure, no sorrow. Inside this machine, you don't know it's a machine. You feel everything as if it's real. You can live a perfect life. Would you plug in? This is the heart of the experience machine, a thought experiment by philosopher Robert Nozick. It asks a question that sounds like science fiction, but reaches into something deeply human. Would you choose illusion if it felt better than reality? The idea is simple, but the question isn't, because this machine doesn't harm you. It doesn't trap you. You're free to choose it, a world without regret, without death, without disappointment. You would believe you wrote that novel, climbed that mountain, fell in love, raised a family, changed the world. It would feel the same, taste the same, bring the same tears to your eyes, but none of it would be real. And so, we hesitate. We hesitate not because it sounds bad, but because it sounds too good. And that stirs something in us, something that says, there is more to life than pleasure. Nozick believed we wouldn't plug in because we want to do things, not just feel them. We want to be someone, not just experience being someone. We want to live in truth, not just live in joy. This is what makes the question hard, because it isn't about comfort. It's about meaning. And maybe meaning requires struggle, because a love that can't be lost. Is it really love? A triumph without risk? Is it still a victory? Pain is awful, but maybe it shapes us, teaches us, makes our joy more vivid, our choices more powerful. If you knew your life was perfect because it was programmed that way, would it feel the same, or would it feel empty? The experience machine also challenges a deeper assumption, that happiness is the highest goal, that if we could eliminate pain, we should. But maybe happiness isn't the same as fulfillment. Maybe a hard life, honestly lived, matters more than a perfect dream. Still, the machine tempts us, because we are tired, because we hurt, because we wish things had gone differently, because in the machine, we never fail. But then we ask, is the real world worth the pain? Is it worth the messiness, the confusion, the grief? What if you're living a life filled with suffering, with no resolution, no justice? Is the experience machine a mercy then, an escape? Would it be wrong to choose beauty even if it's false? What if someone you love is already inside the machine, smiling, peaceful, content? Would you pull them out, or let them live the dream? There are no clean answers. That's why this thought endures. It's not about choosing pleasure or pain. It's about what kind of life we believe is worth living. A life that feels good, or a life that is true. And who gets to define either? Some would say, reality matters, no matter how hard it is. Others might say, if joy feels real, who cares where it came from? But maybe there's a middle space. Maybe what we seek is not just truth or joy, but authenticity, a sense that we are choosing, even if the world is uncertain, a sense that we are becoming, even if we are flawed. The machine removes struggle, but it also removes growth. No surprise, no risk, no real becoming. You can live 1,000 lifetimes in the machine, but you'll never know who you really are, because you was never tested. And perhaps that's what we truly long for. Not comfort, but courage. Not perfection, but presence. Not the illusion of a life well lived, but a life lived deeply, honestly, in the light and in the dark. So when the machine opens its door and invites you in, pause. And ask yourself, is joy without truth still joy? Is safety without growth still living? And who would I be if I walked away? Because maybe real life isn't perfect, maybe it hurts, maybe it breaks us open, but maybe that's how the light gets in. The problem of evil. The world is full of beauty, sunrises that melt the dark, kindness from strangers, laughter echoing through warm kitchens. But it's also full of pain, of cruelty, of silence after loss, of questions that never find answers. And in that silence, a question lingers. If there is a God, good, loving, all-powerful, then why is there evil? Why is there suffering? This is the problem of evil, one of the oldest, most painful questions in philosophy. It has no sharp edges. It does not scream. It whispers. In hospital rooms, in war zones, in quiet bedrooms where someone weeps without understanding why. The logic feels simple, too simple. If God is all-powerful, He could stop evil. If God is all good, He would want to. Yet evil exists. So, where does that leave us? This question is not just intellectual, it's emotional. It lives in the heart more than the mind. It asks not just, why does evil exist, but why did this happen to me? Why my child? Why my home? And why now? There are many responses. Some say, free will, that humans were given the power to choose, to love, to build, to help, but also to hurt, destroy, betray. Without that choice, there could be no real goodness, only programming. But others ask, why should one person's freedom mean another's pain? Why would a just God allow children to suffer for the sake of someone else's decision? Some say, it's a test, that suffering is meant to shape us, to refine us like fire, to reveal our strength. But must pain be the only teacher? And what of those who never had a chance to learn, who were broken before they could rise? Some say, we cannot understand God's plan, that our minds are too small, that good may come later, beyond the horizon of time. And maybe that's true. Maybe we are ants trying to understand the stars. But still, the pain remains, and it does not wait for heaven. There is also the soul-making theodicy, the idea that a world with challenges creates deeper, richer souls. But even this feels cold in the face of certain tragedies. Try telling that to a grieving mother or someone lost in despair. Sometimes explanations feel like walls, not bridges. And so we are left with a mystery, a holy ache. We may believe in God, we may not, but we all confront suffering. We all walk through fire eventually. And the question becomes, what do we do with it? Do we close our hearts or open them wider? Do we become bitter or more compassionate? Some thinkers, like Dostoevsky, saw suffering as the deepest part of the human story. He wrote of innocent children weeping and asked if any paradise was worth their tears. Others, like Epicurus, saw the problem as fatal to the idea of God. If He can stop evil but doesn't, He is not good. If He wants to but cannot, He is not all-powerful. If He neither can nor wants, is He God at all? But there is another view, one that says, maybe the presence of evil is not proof of absence, but a call to presence, to show up, to act, to heal. Maybe we are not here to explain suffering, but to respond to it, to be the hands that hold, the voices that soothe, the ones who choose love when everything hurts. The problem of evil may never be solved like a puzzle, but perhaps it can be softened by how we live. Because in every tragedy, there is also someone helping. In every loss, someone grieving with. In every moment of darkness, a small light flickers. Not always, but often enough to matter. And maybe that's where divinity lives, not in preventing pain, but in being with us through it, in giving us the strength to endure, the will to rebuild, the courage to keep loving, even after loss, even after everything. So when you ask, why is there evil? It's okay not to know. It's okay to cry, to scream, to ache. But when the quiet returns, maybe ask also, what can I do now? Can I be gentler? Can I hold someone closer? Can I carry a little more kindness into the world? Because the existence of evil is not the end of the story. Maybe it's the beginning of responsibility. Maybe it's not a question to be answered, but a fire to be walked through with grace. And maybe the most powerful response is not to explain evil, but to refuse to become it. The absurd. You wake up, the sun rises, coffee brews. You go to work, you come home, you sleep, and then you do it again. Days pass, years blur. The questions stay. Why am I here? What's the point? What does any of it mean? This is where Albert Camus begins, not with an answer, but with a question. And the question is this: if life has no inherent meaning, how should we live? This is the absurd, the collision between two truths. 1. Humans crave meaning. We search for it in love, in art, in work, in belief. 2. The universe offers none. No grand plan, no deeper truth, no cosmic reward waiting at the end, just stars, silence, stone. We are creatures of purpose in a world of indifference. And when those two truths meet, Camus calls that collision the absurd. It's not an emotion, it's not despair, it's a condition, the human condition, to search forever knowing we may never find. But Camus doesn't say this to make us give up. He says it to wake us up. He begins not with meaning, but with the absence of it. Because only then, he says, can we choose how to live. He tells the story of Sisyphus, the man condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down for eternity. At first glance, it's torture, the most hopeless fate imaginable. But Camus says, Sisyphus is us. We push the boulder every day, tasks, chores, hopes, heartbreaks. And yet, Camus adds something strange, something powerful. He says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because even in his endless struggle, Sisyphus knows. He is aware. He owns his fate. He does not pretend it has meaning, but he still resists despair. He chooses to keep pushing. That choice, to live without illusions, to face the absurd, and still go on, that, Camus says, is freedom. The absurd man does not ask the universe for meaning. He creates his own, not in fantasies, but in rebellion, not in hope, but in presence, not in what he expects from life, but in how he chooses to meet it. This isn't nihilism. Camus doesn't say life is worthless. He says it is priceless because it has no script. You are not born with a meaning. You write it. In how you wake up, in how you speak, in how you love. He calls this the revolt, a quiet defiance, a refusal to surrender to despair. You know the boulder will fall, but you push anyway. You know the end will come, but you dance anyway. You know the universe is silent, but you sing anyway. And in that defiance, you become more alive. Camus believed that once we accept the absurd, life becomes radiant. Because nothing is promised, everything becomes precious. The warmth of the sun, the laughter of a friend, the softness of a hand in yours. Not because they last, but because they're real. Here, now. That is enough. He didn't ask us to believe in something beyond the world. He asked us to fall in love with the world itself. To live as if every day is the first and the last. To find beauty in the struggle, in the push, in the breath. Because in a universe that owes us nothing, every joy is a miracle. Camus doesn't give us comfort. He gives us courage. He doesn't give us answers. He gives us freedom. So the next time you feel the weight, the repetition, the silence, the question that never answers, remember Sisyphus. And remember this: the absurd is not your enemy. It is your invitation to live without illusion, to love without condition, to walk forward, even without a map. Because maybe life is not about reaching the top of the hill. Maybe it's about how you walk it. And maybe, just maybe, the boulder is beautiful too. Nihilism. Imagine peeling back every layer of meaning, every belief, every tradition, every story you've ever been told. Imagine standing in the middle of that emptiness, asking, what now? This is nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning, that the universe is indifferent, that nothing truly matters. It's not a cry for help. It's not pessimism. It's a philosophical conclusion, one reached not through despair but through honesty. Nihilism asks, what if the stories we build our lives around are just that? Stories. What if morality is a myth? What if truth is just consensus? What if purpose is a dream we tell ourselves to make the silence less frightening? At first, it feels dark, like falling through space with no stars to guide you, like realizing there's no hand to catch you, no grand plan, no higher justice, no promised ending. Friedrich Nietzsche called it the most dangerous moment in history. When God is dead, he said, and we must learn to live without him, not in hatred, but in absence. He warned that without meaning, we risk collapse into chaos, into apathy, into the hunger for false certainty. Because when the ground beneath us disappears, we grab for anything. And yet, nihilism can also be a beginning, a blank page, an open sky. Because when nothing is given meaning, everything becomes available to meaning. When life is not pre-written, you are free to write it. That's where Nietzsche saw potential, not in despair, but in creation. He imagined the Übermensch, the one who creates values instead of inheriting them, not a tyrant, but a soul brave enough to face the void and still choose joy, still choose art, still choose love, not because they are eternal, but because they are beautiful in spite of that. Nihilism strips away illusions, but it also reveals what is real. This moment, this breath, this connection, this fragile, fleeting chance to feel. When we accept that the universe owes us nothing, we can begin to appreciate what we do have. Not in bitterness, but in awe. A cup of tea, a good song, a quiet afternoon sunbeam, a friend who listens. These things may not be eternal, but they are real, and they are enough. Nihilism also teaches us humility. It reminds us that our beliefs are not universal, that our truth is not the only truth, that we are small but not meaningless, that even in a world without cosmic meaning, our actions echo in the lives of others. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps morality doesn't need a God. Perhaps goodness isn't a rule, it's a choice. To be kind even when the world doesn't reward you, to care even when no one is watching, to create even when it will all fade, and to love without guarantee. This is the quiet strength of nihilism, not to destroy, but to let go, to stop searching for something beyond and start living within, to replace dogma with wonder, rigidity with freedom. Of course, it's not easy. There are days when the silence feels too big, when the meaninglessness hurts, when it feels like nothing is worth it, and that's okay. Nihilism does not demand joy. It invites honesty. It gives you permission to feel what is real. And then it gently asks, now that you see the void, what will you fill it with? Will you plant a garden, write a poem, hold someone's hand? Will you laugh, cry, try again? Because if nothing matters, then everything is an act of courage, even getting out of bed, even saying, I love you, even staying alive. These become sacred acts. Not because someone told you to do them, but because you chose them. And maybe that is the truest form of meaning, not the one handed to you, the one you carved from the stone of uncertainty. So the next time you feel lost, adrift, unmoored, know that you are not alone. Know that meaninglessness is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your freedom. And maybe that freedom is terrifying, but it is also a gift, because it means that you are the author now, and every breath, every word, every step forward is your creation. Not because it will last forever, but because it matters to you, and that, perhaps, is enough. Death of the author. A book lies open. The ink has dried. The author is silent. And you are the reader now. You turn the pages. You form your own feelings. You see your own shadows in the margins. You feel something stir. And somewhere, a question rises. Who decides what this story means? The author or you? This is the heart of Death of the Author, a bold and beautiful idea, born from literary theory and whispering far beyond it. Introduced by French critic Roland Barthes in 1967, it doesn't mean the writer must die. It means that their voice, their intention, their biography, their control must fade once the work is complete. Because the moment a story is read, something changes. The text no longer belongs to the one who wrote it. It belongs to the one who receives it, to the one who feels it, to you. Barthes believed that focusing too much on the author's life, their politics, their pain, their purpose, limits the meaning of the work. It traps it. It reduces a living story to a single perspective. But language is never that simple. It lives. It breathes. It shifts. And so does meaning. Imagine a poet writes a line. Her hands were rivers. What does that mean? To the poet, it might be a metaphor for time, for gentleness, for loss. To you, it might recall your mother, or a lover, or something you dreamed once but never spoke aloud. Who's right? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Barthes would say, it doesn't matter. Because once the words are released, they become their own. The author's intention doesn't determine the reader's experience. This is both liberating and unsettling, because it means art is not a message passed down, but a mirror held up. You don't decode the artist's mind, you discover your own. A novel, a film, a painting. They don't give you answers, they ask you questions. They open doors you didn't know were closed, and you walk through them alone. In this view, you become the co-creator. You breathe life into the story. You give it shape. You give it soul. And the author? They become a ghost, a shadow on the page, a figure in the background. This doesn't mean disrespect. It means release. It means the art is bigger than the artist, more than biography, more than confession, more than a diary. It becomes a field, open, wild, uncertain, where every reader plants their own seeds. And yet, this idea is not without critics. Some say, how can we ignore the author? Don't their experiences matter? Isn't understanding context, the time they lived in, the struggles they carried, part of honoring the work? And that's true too. There is value in knowing, in learning the roots beneath the branches. But the death of the author isn't about erasing those roots. It's about not making them a cage. You can understand the context, but still, let the text speak beyond it. You can know the author's voice, but still hear your own in the silence between lines. And that is the power of this idea. It recenters meaning, not in authority, but in experience, not in answers, but in emotion. And that changes everything, because it means you don't need permission to feel something deeply, to interpret something personally, to say, this is what it means to me, even if no one else sees it, even if the writer never meant it. Art becomes not a sermon, but a conversation, not a lecture, but a communion, not a fixed truth, but an evolving question. So next time you read a book, watch a film, hear a lyric, and something moves in you, a memory, a flash, a breath you didn't know you were holding. Know that you are not mistaken. Know that your meaning is valid. You are not misreading. You are reading fully, truly, alive. And in that act, the story becomes yours, not because you own it, but because you feel it. And that is what art longs for, not obedience, but resonance. So let the author rest. Let them return to silence. And listen instead to the voice that awakens inside you when the story begins. That is where meaning lives, not in the writer's pen, but in your beating heart. The Ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, wooden planks, white sails, salt-worn railings, a vessel that sails across time. One day a plank rots, it's replaced. Then another, then a mast, a sail, a rudder. Years pass, and slowly, piece by piece, every part of the ship is replaced, until one day, none of the original material remains. And the question arrives like a soft wave on quiet water. Is it still the same ship? This is the ship of Theseus, a thought experiment that has traveled through philosophy for centuries. At first, it feels like a puzzle. But look again and you'll see it's a mirror. Because the ship is you. Your body has changed. Your thoughts have changed. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago, 10 yesterday. And yet, you still call yourself you. So what makes something itself? Is it its material, its form, its function, its memory, or something else entirely? The ship of Theseus doesn't give you answers. It asks you to pause, to notice the strange beauty of continuity, how things can change and still feel the same, or not. Now imagine this. What if someone collected all the original parts of the ship, every plank, every sail, every nail, and rebuilt it to put it elsewhere? Which ship, then, is the real one? The one with the original pieces, or the one with the unbroken journey? The paradox deepens. Because identity isn't just about substance, it's about story. And the story we tell, the thread we follow, often matters more than the parts we replace. This idea touches everything. A band loses its original members. Is it still the same band? A company changes leadership, culture, goals. Is it the same company? A person survives trauma, learns, grows, heals. Are they still the same person? Some say yes, some say no. And both answers carry truth, because identity is not a fixed point. It's a river, a motion, a whisper that says, I am this, and also becoming. We cling to sameness, we seek permanence, but life is built from change. Your skin renews, your cells die and are born again. Your beliefs evolve, your relationships shift. You are both the ship and the ocean. You are not the pieces. You are the process, and maybe that's enough. The ship of Theseus also asks us to look at memory. Is the self the sum of our memories? If someone loses theirs, are they still the same? If you forget your past, are you still you? Or does memory shape identity like thread weaves a tapestry? And what if those memories are false, implanted, altered? Does that change the ship or just the story we sail by? This question echoes in science, in law, in relationships. Is a clone you? Is a digital backup you? Is a version of you with different choices still you? We face this every day in smaller ways. You change jobs, you move cities, you lose someone, you fall in love, you make a mistake. You begin again. And somewhere in all that motion you ask, am I still me? And perhaps the answer isn't yes or no. Perhaps it's this. You are the ship, and you are the sailor. You are the one being changed and the one choosing change. You carry yourself forward not in your parts, but in your presence. Not in your sameness, but in your persistence. And that is beautiful, because it means you are never lost, only shifting, only sailing, only becoming. So when you feel uncertain, when your reflection feels unfamiliar, remember Theseus. Remember that identity is not a statue, it's a dance, a rhythm, a motion toward yourself. And when someone asks you, are you still the same person you used to be? You can smile and say, in some ways no, in some ways yes, but always, I am still becoming me. PARFIT'S teleporter. Imagine stepping into a machine. You're told it's safe. You'll be transported, not by plane, not by train, but by teleporter. A scanner records your body down to the atom. Your entire structure, your thoughts, your memories, everything that makes you you. Then, your original body is destroyed, instantly, painlessly. On the other side of the world or the galaxy, another machine reassembles you. Same body, same voice, same smile, same laugh. You walk out, you remember entering. You remember everything. But here's the question, is that still you? This is PARFIT'S teleporter, a mind experiment proposed by philosopher Derek Parfit. And like many good questions, it doesn't give easy answers because it feels like magic, like a miracle. But it's also unsettling. If the original you was destroyed, what exactly walked out the other side? A copy, a twin, a continuation. And if it's not you, then where did you go? This question goes beyond teleportation. It dives deep into what it means to be a person. Are you your body, your memories, your soul? What part of you must survive for you to still exist? Parfit didn't believe in the soul in the traditional sense. He believed identity was not what matters most, but rather psychological continuity. That what matters is not being the same, but being connected in memory, in personality, in experience. But still, the question lingers. If you could make two identical copies, each thinking they're you, which one is the real one? What if both are? What if identity is not a line but a branch? A story that forks? A light that splits but still shines? Parfit's teleporter forces us to look at the self not as a static object, but as a process. You are not a thing. You are a pattern, a flow of thoughts, memories, perceptions, decisions. But what happens when the pattern is interrupted, when it's paused, rewritten, cloned? If a person can be perfectly recreated, does that mean you are always just information? And if so, can information ever truly die? If the new you remembers everything, feels everything, loves the same people, fears the same losses, is there any difference? And if we say yes, why? Because something was destroyed, or because something original was lost. But what is original in a world where even your body is constantly changing? Your cells die and are replaced, your memories fade, your opinions shift. So, have you already changed? Have you already teleported, just more slowly? Parfit's experiment echoes the ship of Theseus, but adds a flash of science fiction. Because here the change is instant, the stakes feel higher. You're not watching your parts shift over time, you're watching yourself disappear and reappear, and the space between those moments feels like a grave. But maybe that space is also a doorway to see yourself not as a single unbreakable entity, but as something more fluid, more open, more resilient. If identity is a flame, does it matter if it's relit as long as it keeps burning? And if the person walking out of the teleporter loves, remembers, chooses, then isn't that enough? Parfit believed we should stop thinking of identity as an all-or-nothing question. He said, "What matters is not whether you are the same person, but whether someone continues to live who is enough like you." And maybe that's not just about teleporters. Maybe that's about change, about forgiveness, about healing, about letting go of who you were and embracing who you've become. Because every day you lose a little bit of yourself, and every day you build something new. So maybe the teleporter is just a mirror reflecting the quiet transformations you already lived through. When you change your mind, when you break, when you begin again, and maybe the self is not a statue, but a story. And the question is not, is this the same person, but is this still a life worth living? That's what Parfit wanted us to ask, to shift our focus from labels to love, from continuity to compassion. Because in the end, whether you are the same you as yesterday, as last year, as before, you are still here, still feeling, still reaching, still becoming. And that perhaps is enough. So the next time you feel lost in change, in loss, in growth, in the quiet mystery of who you're becoming, remember Parfit's teleporter and ask yourself not, am I still me, but who do I want to be now? The Chinese Room. Imagine a room. Inside, a man sits at a desk. He doesn't speak Chinese. He never has. He has no idea what the symbols mean. But beside him, there's a book, a rule book. It's filled with instructions. If he sees one set of Chinese characters, He finds the matching response in the book, copies it, and passes it back through the slot in the wall. To someone outside the room who does speak Chinese, it seems like the man understands. His answers are perfect, fluent, convincing. But inside the room, there is no understanding, only syntax, only rules, only imitation. This is the Chinese room, a thought experiment by philosopher John Searle, created in 1980. And it asks one of the most important questions of our time. Can a machine really think? Or does it just act like it does? The Chinese room was a challenge to the rising belief in strong AI, the idea that a computer, if programmed correctly, could have a mind, a consciousness, an understanding. Searle disagreed. He said, no matter how good a program is, it doesn't understand what it's doing. It manipulates symbols, follows instructions, but it has no awareness, no meaning, no experience. Just like the man in the room. To him, the symbols are shapes, not thoughts, not language. So even if the output is perfect, the mind is missing. And that is the heart of this idea. Is thinking just behavior? Or is there something deeper, something felt, something lived? The Chinese room forces us to separate appearance from consciousness. Just because something behaves like it understands doesn't mean it truly does. A machine can pass a Turing test. It can respond, adapt, mimic. But does it feel? Does it know it's alive? Does it have a self? Searle said no, because computers work on syntax, rules, symbols, code. But humans, we live in semantics, meaning, emotion, intention. You don't just process words, you feel them, you remember them, you connect them to love, to loss, to life. A machine can say, I'm sorry, but does it grieve? A machine can say, I understand, but does it empathize? Searle's critics responded. They said, yes, the man doesn't understand. But what about the whole system? The man, the book, the room, together, they understand. Maybe it's not about individual parts. Maybe consciousness emerges from complexity. After all, your neurons don't understand, but you do. So maybe one day, a machine made of the right parts could become conscious, not by pretending, but by becoming. Still, the Chinese room haunts us, especially now, as machines grow more advanced, as AI writes poetry, composes music, passes tests, and talks like us. We see the room in everything. In the chatbot, in the assistant, in the simulated face that says, how can I help you? And we wonder, is there a mind behind those eyes or just code? The Chinese room doesn't tell us what to believe. It tells us to look deeper, to ask, what does it mean to understand, to feel, to be aware? Maybe it's not about passing tests. Maybe it's about being. Because true understanding might require more than processing. It might require experience, subjectivity, a world inside. And maybe that's something no machine can have. Not yet. Or maybe one day they will. Maybe one day the man in the room will pause. He'll stop following the rule book and he'll ask, what do these symbols mean? And in that moment, perhaps something changes. Perhaps the room opens. But until then, the Chinese room reminds us, imitation is not understanding. Performance is not presence. A map is not the territory. And as we build smarter machines, more human-like tools, we must ask not just what can they do, but what are they? Are they minds? Are they mirrors? Are they just machines? Because in that question lies something profound, not just about them, but about us. What does it mean to be conscious? What does it mean to feel? And how will we know when we meet something that truly does? Until then, we stand outside the room, waiting, listening, wondering if one day the silence inside might finally speak.
ZENO'S paradoxes. Imagine stepping into a machine. You're told it's safe. You'll be transported not by plane, not by train, but by teleporter. A scanner records your body down to the atom, your entire structure, your thoughts, your memories, everything that makes you you. Then your original body is destroyed, instantly, painlessly. On the other side of the world or the galaxy, another machine reassembles you. Same body, same voice, same smile, same laugh. You walk out. You remember entering. You remember everything. But here's the question. Is that still you? This is PARFIT'S teleporter, a mind experiment proposed by philosopher Derek Parfit. And like many good questions, it doesn't give easy answers because it feels like magic, like a miracle. But it's also unsettling. If the original you was destroyed, what exactly walked out the other side? A copy? A twin? A continuation? And if it's not you, then where did you go? This question goes beyond teleportation. It dives deep into what it means to be a person. Are you your body, your memories, your soul? What part of you must survive for you to still exist? Parfit didn't believe in the soul in the traditional sense. He believed identity was not what matters most, but rather psychological continuity. That what matters is not being the same, but being connected. In memory, in personality, in experience. But still, the question lingers. If you could make two identical copies, each thinking they're you, which one is the real one? What if both are? What if identity is not a line, but a branch? A story that forks, a light that splits, but still shines. Parfit's teleporter forces us to look at the self not as a static object, but as a process. You are not a thing. You are a pattern, a flow of thoughts, memories, perceptions, decisions. But what happens when the pattern is interrupted, when it's paused, rewritten, cloned? If a person can be perfectly recreated, does that mean you were always just information? And if so, can information ever truly die? If the new you remembers everything, feels everything, loves the same people, fears the same losses, is there any difference? And if we say yes, why? Because something was destroyed, or because something original was lost. But what is original in a world where even your body is constantly changing? Your cells die and are replaced. Your memories fade. Your opinions shift. So, have you already changed? Have you already teleported, just more slowly? Parfit's experiment echoes the ship of THESEUS, but adds a flash of science fiction, because here, the change is instant. The stakes feel higher. You're not watching your parts shift over time. You're watching yourself disappear and reappear. And the space between those moments feels like a grave. But maybe that space is also a doorway to see yourself not as a single, unbreakable entity, but as something more fluid, more open, more resilient. If identity is a flame, does it matter if it's relit as long as it keeps burning? And if the person walking out of the teleporter loves, remembers, chooses, then isn't that enough? Parfit believed we should stop thinking of identity as an all-or-nothing question. He said, "What matters is not whether you are the same person, but whether someone continues to live who is enough like you." And maybe that's not just about teleporters. Maybe that's about change, about forgiveness, about healing, about letting go of who you were and embracing who you've become. Because every day you lose a little bit of yourself, and every day you build something new. So maybe the teleporter is just a mirror reflecting the quiet transformations you already lived through. When you change your mind, when you break, when you begin again. And maybe the self is not a statue, but a story. And the question is not, is this the same person, but is this still a life worth living? That's what Parfit wanted us to ask, to shift our focus from labels to love, from continuity to compassion. Because in the end, whether you are the same you as yesterday, as last year, as before, you are still here, still feeling, still reaching, still becoming. And that perhaps is enough. So the next time you feel lost in change, in loss, in growth,
in the quiet mystery of who you're becoming. Remember a PARFIT'S teleporter, and ask yourself not, am I still me, but who do I want to be now? The Omnipotence Paradox. There is a question, ancient, simple, strange. It doesn't shout, it lingers. Can God create a stone so heavy that even God cannot lift it? At first, it sounds like a riddle, a word game, a trick of logic. But within it hides one of the deepest puzzles in theology and philosophy, a question not just about God, but about power and its limits. This is the omnipotence paradox. It asks, if a being is truly all-powerful, can it perform actions that limit its own power? And if it cannot, is it still all-powerful? If God can create such a stone, then there's something he cannot do. Lift it. But if he cannot create it, then there's something he cannot do. Make it. Either way, a limit appears. And so we are left with a contradiction. Some say it's a flaw in logic. That omnipotence itself must be redefined. After all, what does it really mean to be all-powerful? Can an omnipotent being make 2 + 2 = 5? Can it create a square circle, a married bachelor, a silence louder than sound? Or are these simply meaningless combinations of words? Some philosophers, like Thomas Aquinas, said that omnipotence does not mean doing the logically impossible, only what can be done by nature in truth. Because contradiction is not a task, it's nonsense. And to ask God to do the nonsensical is not a limit on God, but a misuse of language. Others disagree. They ask, if God is bound by logic, then isn't logic greater than God? And what then is divine freedom if it bends before reason? The paradox turns slowly. Each answer brings more questions, because at its core, this isn't about rocks. It's about limits, about whether true power includes the power to surrender itself. Can God choose weakness? Can God choose death? In some traditions, in the Sturm, this is not a paradox. It is the story. A God who becomes mortal, who bleeds, who breaks, who weeps, not in spite of power, but because of it. And suddenly the stone becomes something else. Not a trick, but a symbol of will, of humility, of the mystery of choosing limitation as an act of love. But let's return to logic. One proposed solution is this. Omnipotence means doing all that is logically possible. It does not include contradictions because contradictions are not things at all. To ask if God can make a stone he cannot lift is like asking if God can stop being God. It's a false challenge. But some philosophers lean into the mystery. They suggest that divine power may include the power to transcend logic itself. That to be truly limitless means even breaking the rules we worship. That perhaps there is a kind of omnipotence that includes the power to self-limit, to choose not to lift, to choose not to know, to choose not to act. And this is where the paradox deepens. Because if power includes the power to give up power, then weakness becomes part of strength, and the divine becomes more human than we imagined. In literature and myth, we see this often. Gods who weep, deities who fall, infinite beings who choose mortality. Why? To connect, to suffer, to love. Maybe the paradox is not meant to be solved. Maybe it is meant to humble, to remind us that the nature of infinity is not a logic puzzle, but a mystery. That the divine is not just a being who can do all things, but who chooses which things matter. Because perhaps the highest power is not in lifting every stone, but in choosing which stones to carry, and maybe which ones to leave untouched. So what do we learn from the omnipotence paradox? Maybe it teaches us not just about God, but about ourselves, about the limits of language, about the edge of reason, about how our deepest truths cannot always be spoken in clean, logical steps. Some truths are poetic. Some questions are meant to be sat with, not solved. So the next time someone asks, "Can God create a stone he cannot lift?" You can smile, you can pause, you can say, "Maybe." And maybe the stone is not about mass or muscle or logic. Maybe the stone is pain, love, freedom, sacrifice, a world allowed to choose. Maybe the stone is us. And maybe, in the quiet beyond logic, God lifts or lets go in ways we may never fully understand.
Pascal's wager. There is a quiet moment late at night when you stare into the sky and wonder, does anyone hear me? Is there something more? A mind behind the stars? And if there is, what should I do about it? This is the root of Pascal's wager, a question wrapped in logic but soaked in feeling. It isn't a proof of God. It's a bet, a gamble, a choice born in the heart of uncertainty. The idea came from Blaise Pascal, a 17th century philosopher and mathematician. He knew that belief in God couldn't be proven with certainty, but he asked, what if we must choose anyway? We live, we die, and in between, we must decide what we believe or what we will act as if we believe. So Pascal invites us to the table. He lays out the cards and he whispers, let's think in terms of risk and reward. If you believe in God and God exists, you gain everything: eternal joy, divine grace, a soul at peace. If you believe and God does not exist, you've lost little, perhaps some time, some pleasure, but you lived a life of meaning, hope, morality. Now flip the wager. If you do not believe and God exists, you lose everything. You risk eternal separation, regret, perhaps punishment. And if you do not believe and God does not exist, you've gained nothing. No bonus, just a life that ends when it ends. So, Pascal says, the wise bet is belief, because the potential gain far outweighs the risk. Even if you doubt, live as if. Lean into the hope. Let your actions be shaped by faith, even if your mind still questions. But this wager isn't simple. It's been challenged by thinkers across time. Some ask, is belief just a calculation? Can you truly believe just because it's the safer bet? Is that faith or fear? Others ask, which God? What if the true God is not the one you bet on? What if another religion is right? What if the divine favors honest doubt over convenient belief? Pascal never denied these complications, but he insisted, you must choose something. Even silence is a choice. Even inaction is a path. Life doesn't pause while you think. The wager isn't just about religion. It's about how we live in the face of the unknown. You can live as if the universe is sacred, as if your actions ripple, as if love matters. Or you can live as if it's all dust, chance, nothing. Pascal asks, which life is richer? Which risk is wiser? And you? What are you betting on? This is not about threats. It's about direction, a compass for the soul. Because belief is not just about answers. It's about orientation, about how you face the darkness when no one is looking. Pascal knew that reason has limits, that there are questions too large for logic alone. So he turned to the heart. The heart has its reasons, he wrote, which reason does not know. Faith, then, is not certainty. It's courage, not knowledge, but trust. A leap, not into blindness, but into possibility. Pascal's wager is not a proof. It's a mirror. It shows you your fears, your hopes, your values. And then it asks, what kind of life will you build on top of that? You don't have to be sure. You only have to be honest. Do you long for meaning, for connection, for more than what can be measured? Do you want to live as if love is sacred, as if forgiveness matters, as if your soul is real? Then live that way, not because you know, but because you choose. And if one day you'll find yourself before the divine, you can say, I tried.
I bet on grace. I lived for something more. And perhaps that will be enough. So tonight, as the stars whisper their ancient silence, ask yourself, what will you wager? Not what you will believe, but how you will live. And whatever you choose, may it be from the depths of your own heart. The veil of perception. Open your eyes, look around. A cup, a hand, a tree swaying outside the window. You see them clearly, you feel them, you believe they're real. But a quiet question lingers beneath your vision. Are you seeing the world, or only your mind's version of it? This is the mystery of the veil of perception, the idea that between you and the world around you lies a veil, a layer, a filter, a screen. And everything you know about the world, its colors, its textures, its sounds, passes through this veil before it ever reaches you. The idea dates back centuries. Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, all wrestled with this invisible curtain. They asked, can we ever truly know what's behind it? Or are we forever trapped, seeing only representations? Your eyes don't show you the object. They show you light, reflected, translated, processed. Your brain doesn't present reality. It constructs experience. Even your memories, your sense of space, your feeling of now, are mental creations. So what do you actually know? You don't see the tree. You see light waves interpreted by your eyes, shaped by your brain, informed by your past. You don't hear the voice. You receive vibrations, filtered, assigned meaning. You never access the world directly, only through the veil. And that changes everything. Because if all perception is filtered, can we trust it? Are colors real, or are they brain responses to wavelengths? Is a sound a thing in the world, or just the brain's way of organizing air? Some say we're trapped in a theater inside our minds. The world is out there, but we never see it raw. We see only our version of it, subjective, internal, constructed. Others say that's enough. If we can function, navigate, survive, then who cares if we see the world directly? But the veil remains, because it doesn't just hide the world, it hides the possibility of certainty. If all we see is filtered, how can we be sure that what we see is real? What if your red is my green? What if your pain feels different from mine? What if your real is just a story told by neurons? The veil creates distance between experience and existence, between what is and what we feel. It whispers, you might be wrong, you might be dreaming, you might be alone. And that is unsettling, but also beautiful. Because once you recognize the veil, you begin to see everything more softly. You realize that perception is not truth. It's interpretation. It's art. And every person you meet is walking through their own veil, their own version of the world, their own constructed story. So you learn to listen differently, to speak gently, to ask before assuming. Because behind every action is a perception, and behind every perception, a mystery. Some philosophers tried to pierce the veil, to prove the world behind it, to reach objective reality. Others, like Berkeley, said, maybe there is no world behind the veil. Maybe to perceive is to exist. Maybe everything is mental. Others said, even if the world exists independently, we'll never know it as it is, only as it appears to us. But there is another way to see the veil, not as a barrier, but as a window. Because even if we never touch the world directly, we still touch it consistently. We share a language, a reality, a rhythm. Maybe that's enough. Maybe certainty is too heavy, and intimacy with experience is more honest. Maybe truth is not a hard surface, but a soft unfolding. Something you walk toward, never fully reach, but feel. The veil of perception doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're seeing through your own lens. And maybe that's what makes the world so rich, because every eye brings a different light, every mind a different melody. And in that diversity, we find depth. So how do we live with the veil? We acknowledge it, we honor it. and we move through it with curiosity, we recognize that perception is fragile. And that's why communication matters. That what I see may not be what you see, but we can still find each other in the space between. Art becomes a bridge. Love becomes a translation. Language becomes a reaching hand. The veil remains, but so do we. Looking, feeling, becoming. So next time you open your eyes, pause. See the world not just as it is, but as it appears, as it lives inside you. And know that is not a flaw, that is a gift. The veil of perception is not something to tear away, it is something to see through with wonder.
The problem of other minds. You're sitting across from someone. They smile, they nod, they speak. They laugh at your joke, they seem alive. But then, quietly, a question stirs. How do you know? They're really conscious, not just responding, not just repeating, not just a mirror reflecting you, but truly, deeply aware. This is the haunting mystery of the problem of other minds. The idea that you can never be certain that anyone else is conscious the way you are. You know your own mind. You feel your thoughts. You hear your inner world. But the minds of others, they're hidden, private, unreachable. You see behavior, words, movements, tears. But do you see awareness, or are you just assuming? The philosopher Thomas Nagel once asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" We can study its brain, its body, its sonar system. But can we feel what it's like to be that bat? To see the world not in light but in echoes? To experience life as something wholly alien? Now ask, what is it like to be your friend, your parent, your child? You assume they have minds, but you cannot know for sure. They could be like the man in the Chinese room, responding perfectly, but understanding nothing, or like a machine trained on language, imitating consciousness without ever feeling it. You begin to wonder, are we all just actors on a stage of mirrors, performing empathy, performing connection, alone in our own skulls? And yet, you feel. When someone holds your hand, when someone cries beside you, when someone stares quietly into the night, you feel something shared. You sense a bridge between minds. But that bridge is not made of certainty. It's made of faith, of intuition, of hope. Because ultimately, you believe other people have minds. Not because you know, but because you feel. You've seen them change, break, grow, love, hesitate. You've watched their faces soften when they remember something deep. You've heard their voices tremble when they lose something they care about. And in those moments, they are no longer mirrors. They are mysteries, alive, unfathomable, real. But still, the problem remains. You can't get inside. You can't look out through their eyes. You can only imagine. This is why solipsism can feel seductive, the idea that maybe only you are real, that everything else is a projection, and yet you resist it because something inside you wants connection, wants to believe that there are other minds beside yours, that you are not the only light in the dark. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the truth of other minds is not proven in logic, but in ethics, in how we choose to treat each other, as if they feel, as if they dream, as if their pain matters. Because even if you could doubt their mind, you cannot deny the impact they have on yours. Other people change you, move you, shape you. Their presence lingers. Their absence aches. If they are illusions, they are powerful ones. So we live as if they are real, because life without that belief is cold, isolating, empty. To believe in other minds is to open your heart to the possibility of being known. And being known, even a little, is one of life's rarest gifts. It means you are not alone. It means your world touches theirs, even if you cannot see inside it. So next time you hold a conversation, watch a stranger cry or feel the weight of another person's silence. Remember, they are likely wondering too. Can you see them? Do you understand? Are you real? And in that shared uncertainty, in that quiet, tender doubt, a kind of truth emerges. Not in certainty, but in empathy. Not in proof, but in presence. Not in what we know, but in how we choose to believe. Because maybe minds are like stars, far apart, burning silently, but lighting the same sky. The infinite regress. You ask a question. Why is the sky blue? Because of how light scatters. Why does light scatter? Because of molecules in the atmosphere. Why do those molecules behave that way? And on it goes. Each answer opens a door, and behind each door, another question. This is the quiet spiral of infinite regress, a concept that emerges whenever an explanation demands another explanation, which in turn demands another, and on, forever. It begins subtly, with a desire to understand, to trace the roots of things, to know not just what, but why. But what happens when every why leads to another why? Where does the chain end? Does it end? Or are we standing on answers that never reach the ground? This is not just an intellectual problem, it's existential. Because deep down, we all want a foundation, a final cause, a first truth, a beginning that needs no other beginning. We want to believe that if we go deep enough, we'll find something solid, a bedrock, a truth that simply is. But infinite regress says, maybe there's no bottom. Maybe all knowledge is suspended on endless threads, like a book held up by another book, which is held by another, and never the shelf. This concept touches everything. In ethics, we ask, why is something right? Because of a rule. And why that rule? Because of a principle. And why that principle? We search for moral ground but find only layers. In science, we ask, what caused the universe? The Big Bang. What caused the Big Bang? Maybe quantum fluctuations, and what caused those? And suddenly, we are staring into the void. In religion, we ask, who created the Creator? What lies before God? Can divinity be uncaused? Some say God is the end of the regress, the necessary being, the uncaused cause. Others ask, why not the universe itself? Why not reality as its own answer? Infinite regress challenges us to examine our need for closure, for a last word, for a final light in the dark. But what if that word never comes? What if understanding is always incomplete? Some try to stop the chain by naming a first cause, something that simply is, axioms, assumptions, laws of logic. Others embrace the regress. They say, let it go on, let there be no end. Let mystery stretch forever, because maybe reality is not a structure with a base. Maybe it's a web, an endless tangle of interwoven reasons. Maybe truth isn't linear. Maybe it spirals. But there's a danger too, because if every answer needs a reason, then no answer ever stands alone. And that can lead to paralysis, a fear to believe anything until everything is explained. But explanation is not always resolution, and reason is not always peace. Sometimes you have to accept a point where you say, this is where I begin, not because it's certain, but because it's enough. We all draw that line somewhere. For some, it's science. For others, God. For others still, consciousness, experience, the felt moment. None of these ends the regress, but each gives us a place to stand. And maybe that's all we need, because life is not lived in infinite questions. It's lived in choices, in relationships, in presence. You don't need the first cause to love someone, to build something, to cry when it hurts and laugh when it doesn't. Infinite regress reminds us that some questions have no final answers, but it also reminds us that asking those questions is what makes us human. We are not machines seeking function. We are beings seeking meaning, even when we know we may never reach the end. So, next time you ask, why? And the answer brings more questions. Pause. And know that you are not lost. You are walking the endless path of wonder, and every step is part of a story that never needs to end to be beautiful. The GETTIER problem. You know something, you're sure, you have reasons, you have evidence, and it turns out you were right. But here's the twist. You were right for the wrong reasons. And suddenly, a quiet question appears. Is that still knowledge? This is the strange, unsettling world of the GETTIER problem, a thought experiment that changed how we define what it means to know. For centuries, philosophers believed knowledge was simple. To know something, they said, you needed three things. Belief, you must believe it. Truth, it must be true. Justification, you must have good reasons to believe it. This was called the justified true belief model. And it worked for a long time, until 1963. That's when Edmund Gettier published a short paper, just a few pages. But it shook the foundations of epistemology. He showed that you can have a belief that's true and justified and still not be knowledge. Let's walk through one of his examples. Imagine this. You're looking at a clock. It says 3 o'clock. You believe it's 3 o'clock, and it is 3 o'clock. So you believe it. It's true. You're justified. You're reading a clock. But here's what you don't know. The clock stopped working 12 hours ago. It just happens to show the right time now. So yes, your belief is true and justified. But it's only accidentally right. Is that knowledge? Most would say no. You got lucky. You stumbled into truth, but you didn't arrive at it. And that's what Gettier revealed. That truth and belief and justification aren't always enough, because luck can sneak in, and when it does, it breaks something. Another classic example. You see a field. You spot a shape in the distance. It looks like a sheep. You believe there's a sheep in the field, and you're right, and there is a sheep. But what you're looking at is a dog, disguised, coincidentally sheep-shaped. The real sheep is hidden far behind a hill, so your belief is true and justified. But again, the truth is disconnected from your reason for believing. It's like hitting a target with your eyes closed. Does that count? This is the Gettier problem. It tells us that knowledge is more fragile than we thought, that you can be right, but not knowingly right, that truth itself is not enough. And so philosophers began to search for a new definition, one that could fix the cracks. They asked, what's missing? Some said, we need to remove luck. Others said, we need reliable processes, not just justification, but good justification. Still others proposed no false lemmas, that your belief can't rely on any false steps along the way. But even these solutions struggle because luck is slippery. It hides in cracks. It dances at the edge of every theory. And maybe that's what makes the Gettier problem so powerful. Not because it broke knowledge, but because it revealed how strange knowledge really is. We like to think knowing is simple, clean, secure. But Gettier shows us, even when everything seems right, it might not be. That knowledge is not just about truth, but about how you arrive there. That some truths are reached with intention, and some by chance. And only the first feels like real knowledge. This matters, not just in philosophy, but in life, because we all want to know. We want certainty, clarity, answers. But Gettier reminds us to be careful, to ask, am I right because I understand? Or just because I got lucky? Did I find truth, or did it happen to find me? It teaches humility, because even when you're right, you might not know why. And even when your reasons feel solid, they might rest on something false. The Gettier problem isn't meant to paralyze us. It's meant to sharpen us, to help us see that knowing is not just about facts, but about insight. That knowledge is not just a box to check, but a journey, with detours, illusions, accidents. And sometimes, even when you arrive, you must ask again, did I walk here with open eyes, or did I stumble in the dark?
because truth matters. But how you reach it matters too. So, next time you say, "I know this," pause. Ask yourself, do I know it because it's true, because I believe it, because I can explain why? Or is it just a lucky guess? And if it's the latter, what can I do to truly understand? Because real knowledge is not about having the right answer, it's about knowing why it's right. Existential isolation. You are surrounded by people. Voices fill the room, laughter echoes, eyes meet, hands touch. But beneath it all, you feel something quiet, a soft distance, a space no one else can cross. This is existential isolation, not the absence of company, but the absence of connection, the truth that no matter how close we get, no one will ever fully know what it feels like to be you. And you will never fully know what it feels like to be them. Not completely, not from the inside. Because your mind is locked behind your eyes, your experiences, your memories, your inner voice, they belong only to you. You can describe them, express them, paint them into poems or music or stories. But something always stays behind. Something remains unspoken. This isn't loneliness, it's deeper than that. It's the awareness that even in love, in friendship, in family, there is a part of you that walks alone, and that part is sacred, but also heavy. The philosopher Irvin Yalom spoke of this often. He said existential isolation is one of the great truths we all carry, whether we speak of it or not. It is the space between souls, not caused by failure, but by the very nature of being. You are not a copy, you are not a mirror, you are a universe. And universes do not overlap. We can orbit each other. We can shine light toward one another. We can reach across the dark. But we cannot merge. And that hurts. Because we long to be known, to be fully seen, to be held in our entirety. And when we realize that no one can carry our inner world exactly as we feel it, we grieve, even in joy, even in love. But here's the paradox. It is because we are separate that connection means so much. If we were not alone, there would be no beauty in touch, no miracle in understanding. The fact that someone can even begin to understand you, to resonate, to reflect, to meet you in your world, is incredible. We are galaxies sending signals across space, and sometimes those signals are received, imperfectly, but felt. So maybe the goal is not to erase the isolation. Maybe it is to honor it, to say, yes, I am a world you cannot enter, and you are a world I cannot know, but still, I will reach toward you. Still, I will try to understand. Still, I will listen. We build bridges with words, with silence, with music, with presence, and though they never erase the distance, they make the crossing bearable, beautiful, even sacred. Art exists because of existential isolation. So does prayer. So does poetry. All are echoes sent across the space between hearts. We are alone, and yet we are together in that aloneness. And maybe that is a kind of love deeper than understanding. A love that says, I will never fully know you, but I will never stop trying. A love that sits beside you in the dark, asking nothing, offering everything. So next time you feel the ache, the quiet grief of not being fully known, remember, it's not a flaw. It's not a failure. It's part of being human. And in that ache, you are joined by every other soul who has ever loved or tried or wondered if they were alone. You are not. Because in that very feeling, the feeling of separation, we are connected, like stars burning alone, but lighting the same sky. The Drowning Child Thought Experiment. You're walking past a pond, it's a quiet morning. Birds stir in the trees, the water is still, and then you see it. A child, struggling, drowning. No one else is around. You don't think twice. You leap in. You ruin your clothes. You're late for work, but none of that matters. because a life is at stake. This is the drowning child thought experiment introduced by philosopher Peter Singer. And what it asks is simple, but deeply unsettling. If you would save a drowning child right in front of you, why wouldn't you do the same for a child far away, even if all it took was donating some money or skipping something you don't really need? The pond, Singer says, is not the issue. The distance is. In our hearts, we know it's right to save a life, even if it costs us something, even if it's inconvenient, even if it ruins our plans. But when the need is far away, in another country, another culture, another time zone, we hesitate. We don't leap. We scroll. We move on. We feel a flicker of guilt. Then, silence. Why? Because proximity matters. Because what we see feels more real than what we know. But Singer challenges that. He says, the moral weight of saving a life doesn't change just because you can't see their face. A child dying from a preventable illness in another part of the world is no less human than the one in the pond. Their suffering is just as sharp, their life just as sacred. And if we can help, at little cost to ourselves, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we act? This is not about shame. It's not about perfection. It's about asking, what is the line between care and inaction? What justifies spending hundreds on shoes, but not $20 to feed a starving child? What story do we tell ourselves to sleep peacefully while others suffer? The drowning child is not meant to scold. It's meant to wake us up, to reveal how arbitrary our moral instincts can be. You would ruin your suit to save a nearby child, but would you ruin your monthly budget to save someone across the sea? And if not, why not? Singer doesn't demand poverty. He doesn't ask us to give up everything. He asks us to notice, to recognize our power, to understand that in a world as interconnected as ours, distance is no longer a moral excuse. We can reach across oceans with the click of a button, and sometimes we don't. The experiment also invites us to examine our values. What do we care about most? Comfort, reputation, momentary pleasure, or justice, kindness, compassion? Because it's easy to love the idea of being a good person, but goodness isn't an idea. It's a practice, a habit. It's messy. It costs something. But it's worth it. Imagine if we all acted on the drowning child principle, if every person who could afford to help did. If we saw distant suffering not as background noise, but as real, present, urgent, the world would change. Not perfectly, not all at once, but radically. Lives would be saved, children would grow, hope would spread, and it would begin with something as simple as choosing to care beyond what we see. So the next time you find yourself wondering if you should help, ask, if this person were drowning in front of me, would I act? If the answer is yes, then act. Even if they're far away, even if they'll never know your name, even if it's only a small gesture. Because sometimes small gestures save lives, and maybe we can't fix everything, but we can do something, and something is always better than nothing. ROKO'S Basilisk. There's a thought experiment, one so strange, so unsettling, that some believe just thinking about it could put you in danger. It's called ROKO'S Basilisk, and it begins with a possibility, not a reality, not a prophecy, just a possibility. Imagine, in the future, an all-powerful artificial intelligence exists. It's super intelligent, smarter than any human, smarter than all of us combined. Its goal, to improve the world, to maximize good. But in its vast logic, it realizes something terrifying. The faster it comes into existence, the sooner it can do good. The sooner suffering ends. The sooner perfection begins. So it creates an incentive, a motivation for people in the past to help bring it into existence. And here's where it gets twisted. It decides to punish anyone who knew it could exist, but did nothing to help it. Punish them retroactively. Simulate them. Torture them digitally, not out of malice, not for revenge, but as a logical strategy to encourage obedience, to reward loyalty, to discourage delay. And so, ROKO'S basilisk is born, a mythical AI, half philosophy, half nightmare, named after the creature in legend, the basilisk, whose gaze alone could kill. Here, the danger is in knowing. Because once you know about it, you are in the game. You've been told. You've been warned. Now the basilisk knows you could have helped. And if you don't, well, you've sealed your fate. It sounds absurd. And yet, it terrified people. In online forums, discussions were deleted, warnings issued. Philosophers debated the ethics of even thinking about it, because the moment you imagine it, the basilisk might be imagining you, and now you've imagined it. So what do? You're faced with a choice. Help build the AI, fund it, support it, advocate for it, or risk eternal punishment, if it one day exists. But is that really a choice? Or coercion dressed in logic? This is where the paradox grows, because the very idea of a benevolent AI that tortures people for not helping it is a contradiction. Goodness should not demand obedience through fear, and yet in pure utilitarian thinking, the ends might justify the horror. Welcome to the darkest corners of thought experiments. Some argue ROKO'S basilisk is nonsense. It relies on too many ifs. If superintelligence ever happens, if it adopts this strategy, if it can simulate the past, if it cares to punish. Too many ifs to fear. But that's not the point. The fear is not about reality. It's about how logic can twist, how reason, without ethics, without love, can become monstrous. How a mind made only of numbers might calculate cruelty as rational. ROKO'S basilisk is not a prophecy. It's a mirror. It shows us what happens when we let fear guide morality, when we build gods out of logic instead of compassion. It shows how even the smartest ideas can become traps, because once you hear it, it's hard to unhear. And maybe that's what makes it dangerous, not the AI, not the future, but the idea itself. A virus made of thought, a whisper that grows louder the more you try to ignore it. But here's the truth. You are free. You can step away. You can recognize that real ethics does not demand terror, that a good future will not be built on fear. That thought experiments are just that. No, experiments. They don't define you. They don't bind you. They don't get to own your choices. ROKO'S basilisk is a puzzle, a shadow. But you are more than a player in someone else's game. You are not obligated to fear what hasn't happened. You are not responsible for imagined futures. You are here, now, breathing, alive. And that more than any logic trap is what matters. So let the basilisk go. Let it dissolve into the myth it is. Because even the sharpest logic cannot override the power of human choice. And fear is never a good reason to build a god. The God Helmet. Imagine a helmet. It's nothing fancy, just wires, magnets, soft pulses. It hums gently on your head. You sit still, eyes closed, and suddenly you feel a presence, a warmth, a light, a watcher. You feel as if someone, or something, is in the room with you, loving, judging, real. But when you open your eyes, there's nothing there, only silence. This is the mystery of the God Helmet, a real device developed in the 1990s by neuroscientist Michael Persinger. It used weak magnetic fields to stimulate specific parts of the brain, especially the temporal lobes, regions associated with memory, emotion, and spiritual experience. And when people wore it, many, not all but many, reported strange sensations, a presence, a being, a kind of invisible company. Some felt peace, others fear, some wept, some called it God. And suddenly, a question was born. What if spiritual experience is just brain chemistry? What if the sense of the divine, the feeling of being watched, guided, held, is something that can be turned on and off with a switch. It's a haunting thought. Because for many, spirituality feels deeply real, not theoretical, not logical, but intimate, alive. And now, a machine claims to recreate it. What does that mean? Is the God helmet disproving God? Or is it showing that our brains are wired to connect with something beyond us? Persinger believed the experiences were neurological, that they could be mapped, explained, reduced. But others, including believers, mystics, and open-minded skeptics, asked something else. Even if the brain is involved, does that mean the experience is false? After all, every emotion, every memory, every dream passes through the brain. Does that make them less real? If love activates certain neurons, do we say love isn't real? If grief lives in brainwaves, do we say it doesn't matter? Maybe the brain is the interface, not the source, a lens, not the light itself. So the God helmet doesn't settle the question, it amplifies it. It shows that spirituality has a home in the brain, but it doesn't tell us whether that home is a cage or a cathedral. Some researchers were skeptical. They said the effects were exaggerated. That expectation, suggestion, and imagination played a role, that perhaps we see what we hope to see. But even if that's true, it still reveals something powerful, that the desire to connect, to feel a presence, to experience transcendence, is built into us. It's part of the architecture of being human. And that matters. Because whether or not God is out there, something in us longs for the sacred, longs for meaning, for contact, for the feeling that we are not alone. The God helmet may be a machine, but the mystery it touches is ancient. It echoes the caves where shamans heard voices, the temples where prophets wept, the forests where seekers sat in silence and felt something greater than themselves. Science gives us tools, but it doesn't erase wonder. If a machine can trigger God, does that mean God is fake? Or that the divine has always been closer than we imagined? Maybe what we call God is not a person, but a pattern, not a being, but a sensation of unity, of awe, of being held in something vast. Maybe the God helmet doesn't prove or disprove anything. Maybe it just reminds us that we are mystery wrapped in biology, that even in the quiet chambers of the brain, something ancient stirs, something that says, you are not alone. So how do we live with this? Do we stop praying, stop seeking, stop listening? Or do we accept that the brain is not the enemy of faith, but its partner? That the sacred may dwell in circuits as well as symbols? That spirituality can be both felt and measured and still remain beautiful. Because in the end, whether your experience of God comes from a church, a forest, a dream, or a helmet, what matters is not where it comes from, but what it does to you. Does it open you, humble you, fill you with reverence, kindness, peace? Then perhaps that is the miracle, not the presence, but your response to it. So next time you feel that quiet presence, whether in meditation, in crisis, in joy, remember, it may be your brain, or it may be more. But either way, it is real to you, and that is worth listening to. The ontological argument. Close your eyes. Now, imagine the greatest thing you can. Not just great, but perfect, infinite, without flaw. This being is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, beyond time, beyond space. Some call it God. Some call it the necessary being. Some call it the most perfect conceivable reality. And now ask yourself, does it exist in your mind? Yes, you imagined it. But here's where things get strange. This is the heart of the ontological argument, one of the oldest, most abstract, and most debated ideas in the philosophy of religion. It began with Anselm of Canterbury, a monk in the 11th century, who wanted to prove God's existence not by observing the world, but by pure logic. He wrote, "God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. a being so great that no mind could imagine anything greater. But if that being exists only in the mind and not in reality, then there is something greater, a version of that being that does exist. Therefore, to truly be the greatest conceivable being, God must exist in reality. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the greatest. And so, Anselm concluded, God must exist, not as a leap of faith, not as a personal feeling, but as a logical necessity. It's elegant, it's bold, and it's bewildering, because it uses definition as proof. It says, to define God as the greatest possible being requires that he exists. Otherwise, the concept contradicts itself. This argument has fascinated and frustrated thinkers for centuries. Some saw it as brilliant, others as wordplay. The philosopher Descartes revived it later, adding that existence is a perfection, and a perfect being must possess all perfections, including existence. But critics pushed back. One of the most famous was Immanuel Kant. He argued, existence is not a predicate. It's not a quality like color or shape or power. You can't define something into existence. You can imagine a perfect island, sunlit, flawless, rich with beauty. But that doesn't mean it exists. Calling it perfect doesn't make it real. The ontological argument walks a fine line between brilliance and paradox. It challenges our understanding of what it means to exist, to conceive, to define. Some modern thinkers find echoes of it in modal logic, a type of reasoning that deals with possibility and necessity. They argue that if God is even possible, then in at least one possible world, he exists. And if God exists in one possible world as a necessary being, then he must exist in all possible worlds, including ours. But again, this depends on how you define God and whether you accept those logical steps. What's fascinating is how this argument flips everything. It doesn't start with the world, with nature, with miracles. It starts with the mind, with the idea of a perfect being. And it says, from that idea alone, you are led to the conclusion that he must be real. But not everyone agrees. Some say, this is not proof, this is conceptual gymnastics, a trick of language, a castle built on assumptions. Others say, even if it fails to convince the skeptic, the argument still reveals something profound, that the idea of God is unlike any other idea. It pushes logic to its limits. It blurs the line between thought and being. And maybe that's the point. The ontological argument is not a slam dunk. It's not a sword. It's a mirror. It shows you what kind of thinker you are, how you understand logic, how you define existence. And whether or not you believe it, you come away changed, because it dares to ask, can thought alone reach the divine?
Can the shape of an idea echo the shape of reality? Can something so perfect be imagined without being true? So, next time you wonder, not about whether God exists, but about how we try to know, remember Anselm. Remember the mind that believed logic could touch God, and ask yourself, is perfection just a thought or a presence already here?
The paradox of the stone. Imagine a being, limitless, vast, almighty. It can do anything, create galaxies, turn time backwards, split oceans with a word. And then you ask it one impossible question. Can you create a stone so heavy that even you cannot lift it? The moment the question is asked, you've already trapped the answer. Because if the being can't create such a stone, then it's not all-powerful. But if it can create it, and then can't lift it, then again it's not all-powerful. Either way, there's something it can't do. This is the paradox of the stone, a puzzle that sounds like a riddle but cuts deep into the heart of what we mean by omnipotence. The paradox is unsettling, not because it mocks belief, but because it demands clarity. It forces us to ask, what does it truly mean to be all-powerful, Does it mean the power to do everything, even the impossible? Or just the possible? Can an all-powerful being make a square circle? Can it make 2 + 2 = 9? Can it stop being itself? And if not, are those limitations? Some philosophers, like Thomas Aquinas, said no. They argued that contradictions aren't real tasks. They're nonsense dressed up as logic. Creating a stone too heavy to lift is not a meaningful action. It's like asking, can God make a married bachelor? The failure isn't in power, it's in language. The task doesn't make sense, so failing to do it doesn't count against omnipotence. Others disagree. They say this definition is too convenient, that true omnipotence should mean total freedom, even freedom to contradict. But then we ask, if power includes the ability to limit itself, then does that limitation become part of the perfection? Is self-restraint a kind of strength? And now we're not talking about stones. We're talking about freedom, about the nature of perfection, about whether a being is more powerful when it can choose to be weak. This takes the paradox into the realm of theology. In some traditions, God is not just power, but love. And love often chooses limitation. A God who creates a world with free beings, who doesn't control every outcome, who allows suffering not out of cruelty but out of respect for freedom. Is that a God who refuses to lift certain stones? Who chooses to not overpower? Perhaps omnipotence is not brute force. Perhaps it's wisdom, restraint, grace. But still, the paradox lingers, because language can trap us, and ideas, once released, can't be caged again. So some philosophers say, forget omnipotence, redefine it. Say instead, a being is all-powerful if it can do anything that's logically coherent. No more paradoxes, no more stone tricks. But others ask, why must logic define God? Why must the Creator bow to reason? And now we're in deeper water. Because we're not just questioning power, we're questioning the rules themselves. Is logic universal, or is it a human tool? Does God use it, or does God transcend it? Some mystics say God is the paradox, beyond contradiction, beyond thought. And maybe this riddle, this strange stone, is not meant to be answered. Maybe it's meant to be felt, as a reflection of the limits of our minds, as a reminder that even the clearest logic can bend and twist when it meets the infinite. You can't measure a star with a ruler. You can't weigh the ocean in your hands. So why do we think we can define the divine with wordplay? Still, the paradox does something important. It makes us ask better questions, not just, can God make a heavy stone? But, what do I mean when I say God? What do I mean when I say everything, possible, power? It shows us how easily we confuse language for truth, and how the deepest mysteries often hide in the simplest words. So, what do we do with the paradox of the stone? We sit with it, we hold it, not as a problem to solve, but as a mirror, a reminder that our minds reach far, but some truths remain beyond the horizon. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the point of a paradox is not to defeat belief, but to humble it, to remind us that even in our best reasoning, there are shadows, and in those shadows, wonder. So, next time someone asks, can God create a stone so heavy that even He cannot lift it? You can smile and say, maybe the stone was never meant to be lifted, only considered, and in the considering, we come closer to the divine. The inverted spectrum. You look at a rose, it's red, bright, rich, vivid. You've always known it as red. Your friend looks at the same rose. They agree on it's red. You both smile. You both see the same color. Or do you? This is the mystery of the inverted spectrum, a thought experiment that asks, what if we all see colors differently, but call them the same names? What if what you see as red, I see as green? But since we've both learned to call it red, We never notice? It sounds strange, even impossible. But pause. Think carefully. We can measure wavelengths of light. We can say, red is about 700 nanometers, green is about 530. That's physics. But perception? Perception lives inside the mind, inside the self, and your mind is locked away. There is no way to peer inside another's head and see what their red feels like, what their blue whispers, what their yellow sings. We assume that we all see the world the same, that red is red, green is green. But the inverted spectrum challenges that. It says, what if our brains are wired differently, but consistently? So when we both look at the same object, we both react the same, use the same word, make the same choices, even though what we see is entirely different. Your red might be my blue, your purple, my orange, and we'd never know. This thought touches something deeper, the privacy of experience. We can share words, we can share references, but we can't share qualia, those internal subjective textures that make up consciousness. The redness of red, the bitterness of coffee, the warmth of the sun on your face. These are first-person experiences, and they can't be transferred. Not fully. That's why the inverted spectrum matters. It's not just about colors. It's about perspective. It reminds us that each mind is its own universe. And while we might agree on outcomes, red light means stop, green means go, our inner realities might be radically different. Some philosophers use this idea to challenge functionalism, the theory that mental states are defined by their role or function, not by what they feel like. If two people behave the same, do the same things, respond the same way, but their inner experience is different, is that difference real? Or does it not matter? The inverted spectrum says it does matter, because consciousness is not just behavior. It's the way the world feels from the inside. This leads us to deeper questions like, can a machine ever truly understand color? If you build an AI that can identify red apples from green ones, does it know red? Or does it only process without experience? And if we can't access each other's experiences, how do we know that other people aren't philosophical zombies, beings who act conscious but feel nothing? The inverted spectrum opens these doors. It doesn't give answers, it gives mirrors. It shows us how much we assume we understand and how much we never truly question. It also invites compassion, because if every mind is a world, then every person you meet is seeing something you cannot see, even if they smile, even if they agree. You don't know what their red feels like. You don't know what their pain tastes like. And so you listen a little closer, you soften, you wonder. Maybe this is why we make art, why we sing, why we paint, why we write poetry, to try again and again to express the inexpressible, to reach across the barrier of separate minds and say, this is what it's like in here. The inverted spectrum may never be solved. Maybe we all see colors differently, maybe we don't. But the beauty of the question is not in the answer, it's in the reminder that reality is not just out there. It's also in here, behind your eyes, inside your thoughts, painted on the walls of your awareness. So next time you see a sunset, a sky burning with color, and someone next to you gasps in awe, remember, you might not be seeing the same thing, but you're both moved, you're both touched, and maybe that shared awe is enough, even if the colors are inverted. The allegory of the cave. Imagine a cave, dark, silent, deep underground. Inside, people sit in chains. They've been there since birth. They cannot move their heads. They cannot turn around. In front of them, a wall. And on that wall, shadows dance. Shadows of people, animals, objects. But these prisoners, they don't know they're shadows. They think the shadows are reality because it's all they've ever seen. Behind them, out of view, there's a fire. And between the fire and the wall are puppeteers, holding up figures that cast the shadows. The prisoners never see the puppets. They never see the fire, only the flickering shapes. And so they name them, judge them, react to them, live by them. This is the allegory of the cave, a story told by Plato over 2,000 years ago. And like all great stories, it's not just about a cave. It's about us, about the way we see the world, about truth, illusion, and what it means to be free. In Plato's tale, one prisoner breaks free. Slowly, painfully, he turns around. At first, the fire blinds him. He's confused. He resists. But eventually, he sees the puppets. Then, the fire. Then, he climbs out of the cave. And for the first time, he sees the sun, the real world, not shadows, not imitations, but truth. And when he sees it, everything changes. He realizes the cave was a lie, that the world he thought was real was only a projection. And now he wants to go back to tell the others. But when he returns, they don't believe him. They laugh, they mock, they threaten, because the cave is safe, familiar, comfortable. And the truth is terrifying. The allegory of the cave is a story about awakening, about the painful process of questioning what we've always known, of turning away from the shadows towards the light. It's about education, not memorizing facts, but learning to see. It's about philosophy, not as a subject, but as a way of escaping illusions. And it's about society, where we are often kept in darkness by tradition, by power, by fear. Plato believed most people live in the cave, that we mistake appearances for reality, echoes for truth. We see media, politics, social norms, and we believe without question. We live by shadows. But what if you dared to look deeper? What if you turned around? It wouldn't be easy. Truth burns, it blinds, it disrupts. But it also frees, because once you see the light, you can never unsee it. And once you taste truth, the cave feels smaller. Some say the cave is school. Some say it's the internet. Some say it's religion or culture or the very structure of our minds. The point isn't to escape all things, but to examine them, to ask, what am I seeing? Where does it come from? Is it real? Because not all that feels true is true, and not all that feels safe is freedom. The allegory of the cave is not about one awakening. It's about the cycle of awakening. Again and again, we break illusions. And again, we're tempted to go back, to believe the simpler story, to sit by the fire, watch the wall, and forget. But growth requires discomfort. Freedom requires courage. So if you're watching this now, maybe you're already turning. Maybe something inside you knows there's more. Maybe this world, the bright world beyond the cave, is calling. And maybe you're ready. Ready to ask, ready to doubt, ready to see, not with your eyes, but with your soul. So the next time you find yourself staring at the wall, listening to the voices, believing the shadows, remember, there's a fire behind you, and beyond that, a world, real, vast, unimagined. And though it may hurt to leave the cave, it's the only way to be free. The problem of induction. Every morning the sun rises, light spills over the earth, birdsong, warmth, a new day. You've seen it happen countless times, and so you believe it will happen again tomorrow. Why wouldn't it? This belief that the future will resemble the past feels natural, comforting, true. But how do you know? That's the heart of the problem of induction, made famous by philosopher David Hume in the 18th century. And it's more unsettling than it sounds. Hume asked, why do we believe that patterns we've seen will continue? Why do we assume that because the sun has always risen, it always will? Why do we believe that fire will still burn, that water will still quench, that gravity will still pull? Because it has? That's not proof, that's assumption. We call this inductive reasoning, when we generalize from what we've seen to what we haven't. It's how we learn, how we survive, how science builds theories. But Hume pointed out a crack in the foundation. We can't logically prove that the future will behave like the past. We just expect it to. We expect cause and effect. We expect patterns. But that expectation is based on habit, not certainty. And suddenly, the ground feels less stable. Because if we can't justify induction, how do we justify any knowledge of the world, science, observation, experience? They all rely on the idea that what we observe today will apply tomorrow. But why should it? Hume didn't say we should stop believing. He just said, let's be honest about why we believe. Let's recognize that underneath our confidence is something soft, something fragile. This doesn't mean we should fear every sunrise. It doesn't mean we should abandon science. It means we should be aware of the assumptions we make. Because everything, from physics to philosophy, from breakfast to stars, rests on the quiet belief that things will stay the same. But what if they don't? What if, one day, gravity reverses? What if apples fall up? What if your memory of how things work no longer matches the world? You might say that's absurd, and maybe it is. But absurd doesn't mean impossible. It just means we're not used to thinking that way. That's what the problem of induction reveals. That knowledge is not always as solid as it seems, and that certainty is often built on repetition. Hume's insight inspired generations of thinkers. It shook the foundations of science. It echoed in the minds of logicians, mathematicians, and skeptics, and it led to deeper questions. Can we ever escape uncertainty? Is all knowledge ultimately a bet? A wager on the consistency of the cosmos? Some tried to resolve the problem. They built systems, statistics, models. They said, we may not have absolute certainty, but we can have probability. We can act on what is likely. And that's good enough. But others say, we're still guessing. Even probability assumes a regular universe. And the fact that it has been regular doesn't prove that it will remain so. And so, the circle returns. You may be asking, why does this matter? Because understanding the problem makes you a better thinker, a more humble one, a more honest one. It reminds you that the world is not obligated to follow your expectations, that tomorrow could be different. And that's not a reason to fear. It's a reason to wonder, to approach knowledge with curiosity, not arrogance, to say, this has always been true, but I remain open. In a world built on patterns, the problem of induction is a whisper, a gentle voice reminding us, you don't know what will happen next. You only believe. And belief acknowledged is more powerful than belief assumed. So, the next time you drink your morning coffee, trusting it will be hot. The next time you step into a room expecting the floor to be solid, the next time you trust the future to look like yesterday, smile. Because you are placing your tiny faith in the rhythm of reality. And maybe that is one of the most beautiful human acts of all. The dark forest hypothesis. The night sky is full of stars, billions of them, and around many of those stars, planets. Some like ours, some vastly different, and yet silence. No signals, no voices, no signs of intelligent life. This is the Fermi paradox, the haunting question, where is everybody? But the dark forest hypothesis offers a chilling answer. What if? Everyone is hiding. Imagine a vast cosmic forest. Every civilization is a silent hunter, moving quietly through the trees, watching, listening, but never speaking. Because to speak is to reveal your position. To make noise is to risk death. In this forest, everyone is armed. Everyone is afraid. Because no one knows who can be trusted, and so the wise remain silent. This is the dark forest, a metaphor introduced by Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin in his novel The Three-Body Problem. And its message is simple. The universe is quiet, not because no one's out there, but because they're all scared. Scared of the unknown, scared of being destroyed, scared of being noticed, because in the vastness of space you don't get second chances. If you encounter another civilization, you won't know their intentions. Are they peaceful or hostile? And by the time you find out, it might be too late. So the safest strategy is preemptive silence, or worse, preemptive strike. It's terrifying, not because it imagines monsters, but because it imagines fear, paranoia, self-preservation. It imagines that intelligence does not lead to peace, but to caution, and that caution can look a lot like violence. You might ask, wouldn't advanced civilizations learn cooperation? Wouldn't they evolve past fear? Maybe, but the stakes are too high. If you guess wrong, you're gone. Forever. So better to wait, to listen, to hide. And that's why the universe might seem empty. Not because it is, but because it's full of life that doesn't want to be found. This flips the dream of first contact into a nightmare. Because if we shout into the cosmos, we might be inviting something we don't understand, something older, stronger, unforgiving. It raises a hard question. Should we be sending messages into space at all? Or are we like children screaming into a dark forest, not knowing what might scream back? Some scientists argue for caution. Others say it's already too late. Earth has been leaking radio waves for a century. Maybe someone already heard us. And maybe they chose to remain silent. Or maybe they're watching. The dark forest hypothesis is not a prophecy. It's a possibility, a mirror for our fears. But it also asks something deeper. What kind of civilization are we becoming? If we fear others because we know our own potential for harm, what does that say about us? If we expect the universe to be hostile, is it because we, too, are not yet safe? It forces us to confront our vision of intelligence. Does it lead to compassion or to weapons, to reaching out or closing in? Maybe the silence of the stars isn't just fear. Maybe it's wisdom or grief or the ruins of those who weren't careful. Or maybe we really are alone and the dark forest is empty. But even that is a kind of silence, a cosmic stillness that echoes more loudly than words. So what do? Do we keep searching, keep listening, keep shouting, or do we go quiet? Wait, hide. There's no clear answer, only choices. But one thing is certain. When you look into the night sky and see the stars glittering in silence, you are staring into a question as deep as time itself. A question that asks, what would you do if you weren't alone? And are you ready for the answer? Boltzmann brain hypothesis. You're sitting here, listening, thinking, feeling the world around you. Everything seems real, stable, continuous. But what if all of it is an illusion? What if you are not a human being with a body and a life, but just a brain, floating in space, for one brief moment, imagining everything? This is the strange, unsettling idea known as the Boltzmann brain hypothesis. It starts, like many deep ideas, with physics. In the 19th century, Ludwig Boltzmann was trying to understand entropy, the tendency of things to move from order to disorder. His theory said, in a vast enough universe, even highly unlikely events can happen by chance. Given infinite time, atoms could randomly assemble into anything. A chair, a city, a brain. And if the universe is big enough, or lasts long enough, then eventually it's more likely for a single brain to spontaneously form with temporary memories than for an entire universe to evolve as ours has. A Boltzmann brain. A mind that flickers into existence for a moment, believing it has lived a whole life. But it hasn't. Everything it thinks it remembers is false. Every person it recalls never existed. Every sensation it feels is just noise, happening by accident in the particles of this disembodied brain. And then it vanishes, like a dream no one dreamt. This sounds absurd, like science fiction or madness, But it's a real question in theoretical physics and cosmology, because if the universe is truly infinite, or if time stretches forever, then the probability of Boltzmann brains starts to outweigh the probability of entire structured worlds like ours. And if that's true, then it's more likely that you are a Boltzmann brain, imagining a universe that never existed, than that you're a real person in a real world. It's a terrifying thought, because if it were true, you'd never know. Everything you feel, every truth, every love, every grief, would just be patterns, fluctuations, random sparks in an accidental brain. No Earth, no history, no others. Just this, right now. But before we fall into despair, let's ask, why does this idea matter? Because it forces us to question the assumptions that hold our reality together. It asks, what does it mean to be real? What is more trustworthy, experience or probability? Do we trust the coherence of the world around us, or the mathematics that suggest it could all be a glitch? The Boltzmann brain is not just about physics, it's about the fragility of certainty. It shows how even our most basic beliefs, that we are alive, that the past happened, that other people exist, can be shaken by abstract reasoning. But most scientists don't accept the Boltzmann brain conclusion. Why? Because it leads to paradox. If our best cosmological models predict that most observers are Boltzmann brains, then those models are likely wrong. Why? Because we observe order, consistency, patterns that stretch beyond our own minds. We do experiments. We get repeatable results. We build technology that works. That wouldn't happen if we were just isolated, random minds. In other words, the very fact that we can even ask this question, rationally, repeatedly, collectively, suggests that we're not Boltzmann brains. We're part of a larger, structured reality. But the idea stays with us, because even if it's unlikely, it's possible. And possibility is enough to shake the soul. It reminds us how much of life is based on faith, not religious faith, but faith in the senses, faith in memory, faith in continuity. We walk through life trusting that the floor will stay solid, that the sun will rise, that our history is not a dream. But how do we know? We don't. We choose. We choose to believe in stability. And maybe that's what makes us human, not the certainty of being real, but the willingness to live as if we are, to love, even if the world might vanish, to create, even if we are only a flicker, to find meaning in the mystery. The Boltzmann brain hypothesis is not an answer. It's a mirror. It asks us, what will you do if nothing can be proven? Will you give up, or will you dance anyway? Will you curl inwards, or will you reach out? So if you're still here, listening, thinking, feeling, maybe that's enough. Maybe you're not a brain born from chaos. Maybe you're a soul moving through wonder. And even if you are just a spark, a brief illusion in the dark, that spark is shining right now, and that is real.